Chapter 995. They spent a few hours to deal with the situation outside of the Yuanren world. Zhongshou and Tai Chi, who had come out of curiosity, returned to the Yuanren world. Only Ao Kuan and Ao Yi didn't follow. They still rode Zhongshou's Royal Demon God shuttle and stayed in the outer region. At this moment, the ship battle on the World River had totally ended. After a few hours of intense battle, one of the Tai God lightning ships under Sherulin was sunk. 3 of them were slightly damaged and needed to be repaired. However, in the end, they managed to force 6 cold Crystal Shadow Blade ships to land. This increased the number of Celestial-grade warships to 15, along with the 10 Tai God lightning ships that the Shura race would send over in a few months. The Deqian Celestial Dynasty's outer region fleet would have a total of 25 ships. Their strength had taken shape. Although they were still weak, they couldn't be underestimated. They could easily suppress the area around the Yuanren world. Within the Yuanren world, the battle had already entered its final stages. At this moment, on the border, people were chasing and fleeing. Army after army were moving toward the east. Sieging and uprooting, they were like a hot knife through butter. The outer region, Judu Xianting, was defeated. The Honorable Ling Order and Jijue Celestial Dynasty also suffered heavy losses. When the people in the world found out about this news, it would probably take a little longer. However, one could feel that as time went on, the troops of the eastern countries were slowly losing their morale and panic. There were many examples of them surrendering without a fight. The most crucial battle of Moyang City had already come to an end. The Earth Grey Dao soldiers of Judu Xianing were pretty much all wiped out. Their commander had no choice but to use the strength of 1,000,000 troops to block the 500 spirit-changing demon-slaying warriors. However, the Black Fox Iron Cavalry led by Zhuang Yu forcefully broke through the middle of the army, following which the 40,000 Big Dipper sword soldiers pressed up from behind and secured victory. However, after this, although the Eastern Alliance army was clearly losing, they managed to hold on for a long time, until news of the outer region spread back to the Cloud World. Only then did the 1,000,000-strong army completely collapse. From Zhuang Yu's words, one could tell that he had a high opinion of the enemy commander. This person is an unparalleled talent. He has the same military strength and the same conditions. I am no match for him in a head-on battle. Although he was praising the other party, there was also a hint of arrogance in his tone. Zhuang Yu felt that this was the only area where this person was better than him. In terms of tactics, he was inferior to his opponent, but in terms of military strategy, he was superior. With the same number of troops and the same conditions, if they were no match for the enemy, they would not give the enemy a fair chance to fight. Zhongshou laughed to himself, but since Zhuang Yu said that, he didn't care. He began to pay special attention to this Judu Xianting general. He was able to make Zhuang Yu admit that he could not win in a head-on battle. Even in such a disadvantageous situation, he was still able to bitterly hold on for 4 to 5 hours. Naturally, one could imagine the ability of this person to command troops. An unparalleled talent, no matter where one was placed, was a really rare resource. Based on what Zhuang Yu said, this Judu Xianting general did not need anyone to persuade him when the situation was unsalvageable. He just chose to surrender and let himself be captured. At the same time, the 3 powers of Judu Xianting also surrendered, a total of 140,000 Xian and Huang Grade Dao soldiers. Different from Heaven Grade and Earth Grade Dao soldiers, they normally had restrictions on their bodies and were tough to convert. Their support cultivation methods were basically unable to be converted. It was much easier to convert Xian Grade and Huang Grade Dao soldiers for one's own use. There were restrictions, but it wasn't impossible. Their support cultivation methods could be easily changed, even if most of them were still loyal to the powers they originally belonged to. They could also be sold to slave merchants in the outer region in exchange for resources and money. These people who sold slaves naturally had their own methods to deal with them. This was the unspoken rule of this region. Zhongshou had no intention of being different. He was merciful, but only to his own people and family. He wouldn't give it to his enemies. Leaving their lives and not treating them harshly was already a sign of his benevolence. 140,000 Dao soldiers. Zhongsho was surprised. Even if there were only Xian grade and Huang grade Dao soldiers, there were only 20,000 Xian grade Dao soldiers. However, it was still a huge fortune. What he paid more attention to was the commander of these 100,000 Dao soldiers, like Quebec. This person was around 30 years old, his body was muscular and strong, his demeanor was really calm. Even if he was captured and brought in front of Zhongsho, his expression was still really calm and there were no changes at all. Zhongsho looked at this person, his heart filled with surprise. In this region, there were really few unparalleled talents. To be able to raise their cultivation to God realm while leading tens of thousands of troops, that was even rarer. I heard that when you were captured, you told Zhuang Yu that you were willing to serve me? Yes, I did say that. Lai Ke bowed. I see that there aren't many talented generals under ruler. I, Lai Ke, am willing to volunteer myself to serve monarch and conquer the outer region. Zhongsho smiled. The Deqian celestial dynasty actually had many generals. Among them, there was Kong Yao and Zhuang Yu, both of whom could be called army gods. Xiu Wei was also a wise general and could take charge of a region. Zhongsho and Rin Tianxing were both unparalleled generals who could lead their troops. People like Hu Zhongyuan and Chai Zhou, if they grew up, they would also be really strong. However, most of them were used in the cloud world. In the Yuanren world, the Qian could only take out Zhuang Yu and Gui Xian, who surrendered a few years ago. As this matter involved the old ruler, Zhongsho didn't even dare to give him any important tasks. Even Zhuang Yu, who was slowly finding it hard to manage alone, didn't recommend this person to take control of troops. This person wasn't an unparalleled general talent, but on the battlefield, his decisiveness was only a little weaker than Zhuang Yu. After this battle, he could use him without worry. However, Zhongsho still didn't have enough qualified generals. If this Lai Ke was willing to serve him, then it would be a huge surprise. This person wasn't like Zhong Yuan and the others. He only had potential and hadn't truly grown. As a God Realm cultivator, he must have been through many battles in the outer region during these 1,000 years. His understanding of conquering the outer region wasn't something that Zhong Yuan and Zhongsho could compare to, even surpassing Zhongsho. The moment he surrendered, he would be a great general. His heart was filled with joy, but Zhongsho's expression was still reserved and didn't show it at all. I heard that Lu Mukin spent a full 7 years to recruit General Lai. As an emperor, he lowered himself and personally invited you, using all sorts of methods. However, General Lai surrendered so easily today. Don't you feel that you have let down your old ruler? A fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. If Lu Mukin was a famous ruler, why would he spend 7 years to serve Judu Xianting? Lai Ke had no choice. His so-called methods, apart from being respectful, he also used strength to threaten him. Lai Ke said expressionlessly. He could see the unhappiness slowly appearing in Zhongsho's eyes, but he didn't change it. He betrayed his old ruler without any care, even going as far as to slander him. If it was any other ruler, they wouldn't like him. However, he had always been like that and didn't like Lu Mukin. There was no need to purposely hide anything and say anything good about his old ruler. Some things could be found out just by investigating. Lai Ke has fought to the end for Judu Xianting today, going all out and having a clear conscience. He can't be buried along with Judu Xianting just because of some kindness. On the other hand, ruler Great Gon was slowly rising like the rising sun. If Lai Ke can submit, I will be able to become a good tree for ruler. Zhongsho hesitated. Before this, he was filled with joy when this person surrendered. Now, when he heard Lai Ke's words, he hesitated. If this person treated his old ruler like that, then what would he do to Zhongsho? Lai Ke seemed to sense something, his eyes dimming. Lai Ke knows that if I don't surrender, I will either be locked up for life or be tortured to death. I don't want either, and in the end, I still have to surrender to ruler. Since that's the case, why do I need to be so pretentious? He continued, I can't guarantee that I will be loyal to ruler. However, I will definitely be able to fulfill my responsibilities and do everything the ruler asked me to do. Zhong Shou's brows rose up, and then he broke into a laugh. Do his best. That alone was enough for him. It wasn't realistic to expect everyone to be loyal to him. With the decision made in his heart, Zhong Shou didn't hesitate anymore. With General Lai joining us, our Qian will be able to rise to the next level. You will definitely be able to rise to a higher level. How about we ask General Lai to temporarily be the commander-in-chief of the right army? The Qian was split into front, back, left, right, middle, and 5 armies, with the inspector as the main officer. The position of commander was only lower than that of the inspector. After Zhuang Yu submitted, he had taken up this position. Lai Ke was different from the others. He had proven himself on the battlefield and was a famous general that everyone respected. So, if he was directly appointed as the inspector, no one would have any objections. However, Zhong Shou wanted to see what kind of person this person was and whether or not he could be given such an important task. Lai Ke didn't hesitate and bowed. I am really grateful and won't disappoint ruler. At this moment, Zhong Shou still had numerous matters to deal with. He had to take over the Yuanren world countries and prepare an army to continue conquering the surrounding worlds. He also needed to send troops to take down a portion of the 9 degrees celestial dynasty. It could be said that he was so busy that he wished he could split himself into several pieces. Less than 15 minutes after meeting Lai Ke, he didn't even have time to have a deep conversation. Zhong Shou could only send this new right army commander away. However, before he left, he heard Lai Ke remind him, I heard that ruler's navy captured Judu Xianing Navy Governor Yilingsu. This person isn't simple. If possible, ruler should persuade him to surrender. Zhong Shou was stunned. He had seen the ability of that Judu Xianing Navy Governor. He wasn't as talented as Rulin, but he wasn't much weaker. Using his vast experience, he was able to deal with Shi Rulin. At one point, he even caused the dozens of the Qian spaceships to be unable to fight back. However, what Lai Ke meant was that he should spend some effort to persuade him to surrender. Why did he need to do that? Then, he heard Lai Ke say, this person comes from an artificer family, and his family holds huge power in Judu Xianting. Judu Xianting's artificers who can craft cold crystal shadow blade ships are all under his control. Due to being in the military for so long, his reputation is really high. If we recruit this person, we can pull over at least 10 of the remaining 50 cold crystal shadow blade ships from Judu Xianting. Chapter 996. Hearing Lai Ke's words, Zhong Shou knew that there was actually such a treasure amongst his prisoners. He didn't care much about the cold crystal shadow blade ships, as they weren't the top amongst the Earth-grade warships. It also needed more than 5 extreme blade celestials from the 9 capital celestial dynasty to have the ability to go up against God realm experts. Compared to the Tai God lightning ship that just needed 1 peak celestial realm expert, it was far weaker. Moreover, at this moment, the Qian dynasty had just risen up, and if they recruited too many traders, there would be a problem. However, Zhong Shou cared a lot about those blacksmiths. After all, he had crafted Earth-grade spaceships before and had enough experience. When crafting other types of ships, he would be really good at it. However, Yilingsu wasn't as smart as Lai Quebec. Zhong Shou used both hard and soft methods, just like what Lai Ke said, using all sorts of methods. Using strength to force him, using emotions to move him. He was just short of using his family to threaten him before he agreed. He himself didn't agree to be a subject of the Qian celestial dynasty, only agreeing to help Zhong Shou persuade them to surrender. He wanted to move his race, along with the original blacksmith from Judu Xianting to Yuanren world. He also wanted to persuade more cold crystal shadow blade ships to join them. In Zhong Shou's eyes, the reason why this person agreed was because he wasn't sincere. Instead, it was because the Judu Xianting was about to be in chaos. He was worried that his race would be dragged into trouble and wanted to find a safe haven for his family. Zhong Shou didn't care and was surprised. Experienced blacksmiths were hard to find, although the cold crystal shadow blade ships weren't much. However, the people who controlled them, the elite crew, weren't so easy to develop. When all matters were arranged, it was already 10 days later. At this moment, the Yuanren world had basically stabilized. The southeast country royal families had changed hands. Based on the merits of each person, they were split up. Then, he gathered the various generals and selected the elites. Under the protection of Shur Rulin's fleet, they would be transported to the outer realm to conquer the surrounding worlds. In fact, rather than calling it an expedition, it would be more appropriate to call it garrison. At this moment, the surrounding small worlds that originally belonged to the Judu Xianing had basically all fled. Some of the bolder ones even wanted to join them directly. As for the Hanling Order and Jeju Immortal Court, they were smart enough to withdraw their people long ago. They even sent envoys over one after another, bringing heavy gifts of apology to show their intention to mend their relationship. On the one hand, they wanted to cede territory and admit their mistakes. On the other hand, he had gathered the envoys of the various powers to urge him, the Deqian monarch, to abide by the rules of this region. And the so-called common rule was that those above the immortal realm could not easily participate in the domain wars. Zhongsho scoffed at this. At this moment, he had seen through the essence of this so-called common rule. If you didn't have strength, others would treat you like you didn't exist and wouldn't care at all. Only when one's power was strong would these people take these common rules to heart and talk about rules with you. On the surface, he still agreed. After all, the current Deqian didn't have the ability to set new rules. He didn't need to worry much about the Yuanren world. Instead, he needed to spend some effort to take over the Judu Xianing land. Zhongsho thought about it for a long time before deciding to make Guixian the commander. This person was really stable when he used troops. The only time he took the risk was when he lost to Zhuangyu. He probably remembered it deeply and couldn't forget it. Using this person as the commander was to express his trust in him, and also because he didn't have anyone under him. Although the Yuanren world had been suppressed, the situation wasn't stable and there were many variables. Without Zhuangyu there, Zhongsho couldn't be at ease. As for Lai Ke, he had other uses for him. That place needed an unparalleled general. As for the 9 capitals, that place was showing signs of collapsing, and there probably wouldn't be any fierce battles. Along with the dozens of God Realm experts who submitted to Zhongsho taking care of them and guiding them, there wouldn't be any problems. Apart from Zhuangyu, there was also Lu Wubing in charge of the Yuanren world. During these few days, if it wasn't for Lu Wubing helping him deal with many administrative matters, Zhongsho wouldn't have been able to do so. Zhongsho really didn't know whether or not he could handle it. At this moment, he needed to leave. All the more he needed this person to stay to deal with the various administrative matters of the Yuanren world and perfect the rule. At this moment, it actually wasn't totally over. He was only slightly free, unlike those 10 days when he needed to be busy every day. He even needed to use the Book of Ian's time acceleration ability to deal with administrative matters. There was still a period of time before everything was settled. Zhongsho was finally able to have some free time, walking out of the warm room and taking some time to relax. At dawn, the Yuanjing Palace was already bustling with noise. People came and went. Numerous people entered and exited the palace. Zhongsho took in a breath of fresh air and felt disturbed. He shook his head. It seems like this Yuanjing Palace is still a little small. It was still okay to be the center of the Yuanren world, but now that a Qian celestial dynasty was about to rule 60 small and medium-sized worlds and hundreds of countries. Even if most administrative matters were handled by the ruler and imperial court of the mortal world, the number of officials in the celestial dynasty couldn't help but increase, reaching a shocking number of 20,000. At most, in a few years, they would need to consider expanding the Yuanjing Palace or rebuilding the celestial capital. Thinking about administrative matters, Zhongsho frowned. Pretty much all my time is spent on these matters. When will I be able to reach the pinnacle of the sword path? This was a contradiction. Actually, the time Zhongsho spent dealing with administrative matters was really little compared to the other Emperor Lords. Only when Deqian suddenly expanded by 10 times did he seem a little busier. However, even then, in Zhongsho's eyes, it was still unbearable. To become the ruler of millions of worlds, one had to work hard on the land under his rule. To be invincible in the universe, one had to spend more time studying the martial path and the pinnacle of the sword path. It seemed like he had to build a complete cabinet within the celestial dynasty to help him deal with administrative matters. Zhang Huai could be moved out from the cloud world. This person was actually a little more talented than Lu Wubing. To use the cloud world as a stage was just too small. With the two of them working together, this cabinet was already starting to take shape. However, apart from that, they also needed a few administrative talents. Most importantly, there was an experienced person who could help from the side. The most suitable person was Renbua. Thinking about this old man, Zhong Shou felt pain in his heart. Till date, he still hadn't found a way to extend his lifespan. Sighing, Zhong Shou flipped his right hand and a red crystal appeared in his hand. He sent his spiritual sense into it and searched. One could faintly hear the sounds of wailing coming from within. This was Xiaoxiang Zi's soul. After that battle, Zhong Shou didn't hesitate to take his life. Since he had already shed all pretenses with the Taoist faction, then there was no need for him to give him face. After searching his soul, he finally confirmed that the current common people's path was indeed in a precarious situation. Unfortunately, Xiaoxiang Zi's status was too low and he couldn't know the details. However, just from those traces, he knew that the Taoist faction was prepared to attack Song Xingdao. At that time, the Taoist faction wouldn't be the only one to attack. 10 days ago, Zhong Shou was really eager to return. However, he could only bear with it for now and make arrangements for everything here. Taoist faction, only 3 months. Based on Xiaoxiang Zi's memories, Wei Su should be going through his end realm tribulation within these 3 months. Based on this person's memories, for months ago, Song Shengdao sensed that the situation wasn't good. However, at that time, he couldn't back down. Wei Su's cultivation had already reached the limit. At this moment, he chose to break through. He was connected to the heavens, and his tribulation was set. He could only bring it forward and not push it back. It seemed like when he went through his tribulation, the Taoist faction would show their strength. Searching his soul, he couldn't find anything else. The Taoist faction's plans were all unknown. Zhong Shou held the blood-red crystal and was at a loss. He thought about how even if he returned, what could he do? Lead the army back to the cloud world? He couldn't do that, and there was no benefit. He also knew that once Dao, Lord Qing Xian, made a move, it would be like a thunderbolt. Long Ying, Ao Kuan, they all owed Wei Su a favor. Once they knew about the situation, they wouldn't sit still and do nothing. However, the moment they were swept into this whirlpool, even their lives would be in danger. He had flipped through Song Shengdao's records. That year, when the Taoist faction tried to kill Shizi, there were a total of 7 end-realm cultivators recorded. Apart from that, there were the Taoist faction 3 pure ones, the Confucian faction 4 saint incarnations, as well as 7 god treasures. There were also hundreds of saint realm and god realm cultivators who sealed their cultivations and descended. As for the celestial realm and spirit realm, as well as grade 9 cultivators, the total number was uncountable. That battle was a mountain of corpses and an ocean of blood. Taoist faction and Confucian faction both suffered heavy losses. At least 2/3 of the Saint Realm cultivators died. However, the ones who suffered the most losses were the outer region powers. Shoguan couldn't compare to Shizi. He was half a step true realm, but he was peak end realm. This was why he was able to ensure that Song Xingdao didn't fall and was listed as one of the 5 factions. However, the Taoist faction was so confident that they wanted to wipe out Song Xingdao in one battle. One could imagine how much strength they had mobilized this time. Although Zhong Shou could barely be considered a person, he could look down on an area. However, if he wanted to interfere in this battle, he would be as small as an ant and not worth mentioning at all. At this moment, the only ones who could help Song Xingdao were the sky-burning Lu family and the Buddhist faction. Do I really have to ask them for help? The moment such a thought rose up, Zhong Shou laughed bitterly. He was confident that the sky-burning Lu family and the Buddhist faction wouldn't reject him. However, he had to pay a price. Or he could enter the Buddhist faction and become the unlimited beginning and end Buddha. Or he could change his surname and enter the Liu family to inherit the sky-burning saintland. Otherwise, if he wasn't willing to pay a price, why would others help him? In the end, it was Zhongsho's pride that harmed him. Unless he had no choice, he wasn't willing to ask for help from the two of them. Wasn't he too selfish? Thinking about how after this battle, who knows how many common people path disciples would fall in this battle. Zhongsho couldn't help but be stunned. Many of them were his schoolmates for a period of time. He stood still and was in deep thought. Only when Zhongshoxin sensed something did he come back to his senses. Looking out, he saw Tai Chi, Zifeng, and Zhao Yinran walking over together. Zhongsho immediately retracted his thoughts. The three of them definitely came over for sect matters. He had also waited for a long time for the three factions to make a decision. Chapter 997. My Kinzo sect leader wants me to shamelessly ask ruler for an official position. The rank doesn't need to be too high, and I just need to be able to participate in court matters. Tai Chi referred to himself as a subject right away, his heart filled with emotions. Half a month ago, Zhongsho's iron-faced strategist said that they could be subjects of the same hall. As expected, that was the case. He was a little shocked that he directly asked for an official position. He said that the rank didn't need to be too high, but to be able to participate in court matters, it had to be an important position. However, towards the end, Feng Taiji's confidence had more or less increased a little. My Kinzo sect has already come to a decision. They will gather 150 Celestial Realm cultivators and at least 10 God Realm cultivators to rush over to Yuanren World to build another Kinzo sect courtyard here. Apart from that, there are also 2 Saint Realm ancestors who will rush over. He continued, since my Kinzo sect has a 10% share in the Celestial Dynasty meeting hall, we naturally need to contribute to the Qian Celestial Dynasty. If ruler has orders, we won't delay it. However, as for our Kinzo sect's rights and duties, we need to discuss with ruler. Zhongsho looked over with a weird expression, shocked. Before this, the Yuanren world was locked down by the few powers around. Even if there was news, it couldn't be spread over. At this moment, the Judu Xianing was wiped out and the other 2 factions had no choice but to retreat and ask for peace. Their connection with the cloud world was naturally smooth and unobstructed. He also knew that the Kinzo sect and the Buddhist faction would react when they learned about the situation here. They would greatly increase their investment and not let their share decrease by too much. This was expected. However, 150 Celestial Realm cultivators and 10 God Realm cultivators. This scale was out of Zhongsho's expectations. It was really a huge sum. Kinzo sect cultivators weren't something normal cultivators could compare to. He grew up in the cloud world where the spiritual wave was low, and then he roamed the outer region alone, walking up step by step. At the same cultivation level, an immortal state cultivator from the Kinzo sect would be able to defeat the 3 immortal state cultivators he had subdued not long ago. Within the Kinzo sect, there were not many of them. It meant that this was one of the 5 great factions of the cloud world. He already treated this place as the foundation of the cloud world. When the cloud world was about to fall into chaos, it took a lot of courage to separate this power. The corners of Zhongsho's lips curled slightly as he spoke without hesitation. Our dynasty is lacking in talents, and there are countless vacancies. However, the most suitable position is still the position of Imperial Censor. How about Brother Feng become the Imperial Censor of the right of the Immortal Court? He had no reason to refuse. With the help of the Kinzo sect, his Qian dynasty would be as stable as Mount Tai. It was even possible to expand it further. It was time to increase the number of troops invested in Guixian. This was why this time Zhongsho's position would be really bad. Tai Chi was also delighted. This position was indeed suitable. It was one of the few positions in the Celestial Dynasty that had real power. He could monitor the various countries and restrict the officials. He could also participate in country politics and learn about secrets. After the joy, he was deep in thought. For Zhongsho to give this position to him, apart from paying attention to it, he had other intentions. He probably wanted to borrow his hands to let the Kinzo sect deal with the disciples who broke the law in the future. At this moment, he was unable to think about it carefully. Tai Chi said, "Great, right of the imperial censor." He directly made the decision and didn't need to ask the 10,000 sword vast habitat and the Kinzo sect. The Kinzo sect split from the Taoist faction and struggled for 10,000 years to have what they had today. It wasn't that they didn't try to expand outwards, but they were forced back time and time again. Instead, they threatened to shake the foundations of the Kinzo sect in the cloud world. However, at this moment, the dozens of worlds that the Daiqian controlled, as well as the territories that they were about to take in. Even if the Kinzo sect tried many times in the past, they were far from it. Pretty much each time, they would face a backlash. This was because the outer region, End Realm, Saint Venerables were wary. However, it was also because the few sects in the cloud world were dragging one another down. It was with much difficulty that they saw some hope in Zhongsho. Naturally, they wouldn't miss it and had to go all out to walk out of the cage that was the cloud world. As for the cloud world heaven-opening treasure, the Kinzo sect had the least chance of getting it. In the battle of sects in the cloud world, Sword Sect's situation was only slightly better than common people's path. Since there was another feasible path to obtain more disciples and more resources, it was wise for them to give up. In that case, it was also a wise choice to give up and watch from the sidelines. He knew that since Zhongsho had already made a price, then he had no choice but to decline. There was also no need to hesitate. The Kinzo sect is really going all out this time. Zifang smiled at the side. Luckily, our Buddhist faction has invested well this time. 280 diamond fruit cultivators and 15 Luohan fruit cultivators. There are also 3 bodhisattvas who will move into Yuanren. In the Buddhist faction, diamond fruit cultivators were the same as celestial realm cultivators. Luohan fruit cultivators were the same as god realm cultivators, and bodhisattvas were saint realm venerables. Half a step to end realm who grasped at least one god treasure could be called a Buddha. When Zhongsho heard this, he wasn't surprised at all. He thought to himself that the Buddhist faction really took advantage of the situation. How would they miss out on such a chance to spread the Tao? This wasn't just something they could take out. It was much more than the Kinzo sect. Next, it would depend on what this person offered. 13% of the shares in the Senate Hall. Apart from that, does ruler lack an imperial teacher? With Daiqian expanding, the meeting hall naturally needed to be adjusted. Zhongsho was really gentle and would definitely give the people of the various worlds the right to participate in politics. The number of people participating would also increase. As for the Kinzo sect, the Buddhist faction didn't put in much effort this time. They would split based on how much effort they put in. Lowering their share was expected. They learned from their mistakes and invested heavily in case their gains were diluted the next time. Tai Chi squinted and was a little unhappy. However, in the end, he didn't say anything. The more the Buddhist faction invested, the more benefits they would get. Imperial teacher? Zhongsho thought back to Taishang Zhongshuan and shook his head. I don't have any objections. However, to be an imperial teacher, one needs to be able to predict the future. Is Master Zifang up to the task? When Zifang heard this, he pressed his palms together and said seriously, "This is my weakness." However, there are naturally experts in the Buddhist faction. For example, Jingyin Buddha's ability to predict the future. Only 3 to 5 people in this region can compare to her. The choice of imperial teacher will definitely disappoint ruler. Speaking of Jingyin Buddha, Zhongsho couldn't help but think about Jingyin, who knew how long this female, nun who had returned to the secular world, was going to hide from him. Since that is the case, then it is okay. He looked towards Zhao Yinran and the Kinzo sect and the Buddhist faction. Who knows how Song Xingdao was doing? Probably not much. Zhao Yinran said with an ashen white face. Similarly, 3 Saint Realm, 14 God Realm, and 250 Celestial Realm cultivators. There are also 656 Spirit Realm cultivators. When Zhongsho heard this, his heart instantly sank to the bottom. Were they going to move all of Song Xingdao's assets over? They had given up before it even started? To be continued. Chapter 999. Tai Chi and Zifeng both had weird expressions as they looked at Zhao Yinran. However, they didn't say anything. Song Shengdao survival didn't have much to do with the Buddhist faction, so Zifeng didn't care. However, it did have something to do with the Kinzo sect. In the past, the two of them were interdependent. However, since the Kinzo sect was prepared to move a portion of their foundations to the Yuanren world, then whether Song Shengdao lived or died, they could just coldly look on from the side. At most, when the situation allowed, they could help in the dark. In the past, they were worried that Zhongsho would be affected by Song Shengdao's destruction. After all, the two of them had a really good relationship. Zhongsho and the Taoist faction also had huge animosity. If Song Shengdao died, the Taoist faction might attack the Qian. However, now that they knew that Zhongsho was the top heir of the sky-burning Liu family, the two of them naturally didn't have any worries. The Taoist faction didn't have a solid reason to attack, so the chances of them attacking were really low. In the past, they attacked Zhongsho viciously many times, and they could say that they didn't know about it. However, if they attacked for no reason, they would be targeting the Liu family and not placing the sky-burning Saint dynasty in their eyes. This was why the two of them could only sigh emotionally towards Song Shengdao's situation, and there wasn't much they could say. Zhongsho also kept silent. However, he knew that this wasn't the time to speak. He decided to change the topic and directly talk about other matters. How many cultivators did the Kinzo sect, the Buddhist faction, and Song Shengdao need to send each year to serve under him? There is also the number of casualties allowed each year. When the Qian was attacked, the disciples of the three factions needed to work together to defend. It took half a day to settle all the details. Feng Taiji and Zifeng knew that Zhongsho was so busy that his feet didn't touch the ground. After he was satisfied, he tactfully took his leave. However, before he left, Taichi hesitated and reminded, "I heard that ruler is prepared to return to the cloud world. Forgive me for being direct, but the cloud world is in chaos. After ruler returns, your life might be in danger. I advise Monarch to postpone the trip." When Zifeng heard that, he nodded his head. "Those words are good. Ruler, please consider it." Zhongsho just smiled and said nothing. Just by looking at his expression, Tai Chi and Li Qi knew that they would not be able to persuade him. They weren't that disappointed. In their eyes, Zhongsho returning to the cloud world was risky, but it wasn't a big deal. The combined forces of the Kinzo sect and Buddhist sects were more than enough to protect Zhongsho. Even if the Dao sects were to make things difficult for them, they would be able to fight back. Since they couldn't dissuade him, they decisively shut their mouths and left. Only Zhao Yinran was left to accompany Zhongsho. The latter frowned and was in deep thought, keeping silent for a long time. She finally opened her mouth and asked, "What are my few senior brothers planning? They are obviously in danger, but they sent so much manpower to Yuanren world. Are they really prepared to give up on the cloud world and common people's vast habitat?" Zhao Yinran's expression was dim. When she heard that, her eyes were filled with bitterness. Wei Su noticed that something wasn't right when he broke through his tribulation 4 months ago. However, at that time, he couldn't back down. His tribulation was set, and he couldn't back down. He was prepared to leave alone. At that time, the calamity would only affect him, and he could ensure that Song Shengdao had a chance to rise up. However, he was caught by ancestral master Xiuguan on the way. He said that if Song Shengdao missed him, then sooner or later they would be wiped out. Sooner or later, there isn't much difference. Why not go all out and have a chance? Zhongsho's brows furrowed even tighter. Since he made up his mind to go all out, then he shouldn't have sent people who weren't strong enough to this side to split their strength. The other few elders also said the same thing and agreed with Xiuguan. Wei Su was helpless and could only stay. However, after learning about the changes here, especially after you have taken down dozens of worlds, they were delighted. In the end, they decided on this plan. At that time, Xiuguan didn't object. Zhao Yinran tried her best to be calm. This portion of people were sent over by the common people's vast habitat. Later on, the 3 sects and 6 schools will send more disciples over. However, most of them are Earth-grade disciples. Her tone was filled with sadness. Just now, she purposely reported a lot less. Song Xingdao, a sect that was about to fall, took up 13% of the rights in the Deqian celestial dynasty. It was already a little too much, exceeding the Kinzo sect and on the same level as the Buddhist faction. If it was any more, it would make these two sects unhappy. She had cultivated for dozens of years, and this was the first time she faced such a situation. It was also the first time she had to be so careful, like she was walking on thin ice. Zhong Shaoxin's heart turned cold once more. Senior Master Xiuwan didn't object, which meant that even Senior Master didn't have high hopes for this battle. This was why he chose to silently agree to Wei Su arranging a path for Song Xingdao. Apart from shock, he was also at a loss. In his memory, Wei Su should have passed the revered position to that person when the Cloud World spiritual wave was at its peak. A few thousand years later, although Song Xingdao didn't prosper, it would be able to maintain its orthodoxy and stand side by side with the Taoist faction. Why did it suddenly have such a life and death calamity? Was it because of him? Zhong Shaoxin's emotions were in turmoil. He tried to calm himself down, but there was no effect. He knew that it was because of him that things in the world changed too much. After a chain reaction, there were such changes. At this moment, the memories of the last life were totally useless. It won't be so simple to wipe out Song Xingdao. Thinking back to Lin Xuanxuang, who was nowhere to be found, Zhong Shou shook his head. This was also one of the variables that the Taoist faction wouldn't have thought about. His master had successfully broken free from her tribulation and stepped into the end realm, rebuilding her body. Lin Xuanxuang had already deduced that Wei Su was going to change his plans. Naturally, there was no reason for her not to see the dangers within. Who knew where she went? Was she going to heal up, or was she working hard to save Song Xingdao? Anyways, he couldn't sit still and watch on. At most, in 10 days, I will personally make a trip to the Cloud World. At this moment, it was useless to think about how to fight for a chance of survival for Song Xingdao. He needed to return to the Cloud World to take a look at the specific situation before making plans. When Zhao Yinran heard this, she wasn't happy, but worried instead. Her brows furrowed. The revered one wants you to stay here. Wait for the outcome, and there is no need to return. If he is lucky enough to succeed, then naturally everything is good. However, if not, then Song Xingdao needs you to take care of him. Today, only you, Zhong Shou, have such ability. Zhong Shou was lazy to say more and didn't plan to argue with her. Zhao Yinran's words not only didn't make him give up on returning, but instead made him more anxious and impatient. After sending away Zhao Yinran, Zhong Shou returned. However, he didn't go to the warm room that he used to deal with administrative matters. Instead, he walked into his sleeping palace. Sitting cross-legged, Zhong Shou was in deep thought. This time he had an army, but he couldn't bring it back. The only thing that could help Song Xingdao was the power of the Deqian sect within a Cloud World. It should be able to restrict the Taoist faction. Next would be his own body. Initial celestial realm, barely able to beat some God realm cultivators. In this battle, it wasn't worth mentioning. However, apart from that, he had another advantage. World-burning blood eye. This eye technique might be helpful to Song Xingdao, locking down space, seeing the enemy's true situation, etc. However, if he wanted to bring out the full potential of the blood eye technique, he would need to reach a higher realm. Next would be King Path martial arts, attacking the celestial world to obtain this relay point. It could allow his country's strength and king energy to partially affect the Cloud World. However, if he didn't have a certain level of cultivation and foundations, even if he controlled billions of worlds, it would be useless unless his martial path intent could be raised a little and he had a stronger cultivator. Only then would he be able to use King Path martial arts and some secret techniques to temporarily have strength comparable to Saint Realm cultivators in the Cloud World. However, one had to cultivate bitterly step by step. It was tough to find shortcut. He had just reached Celestial Realm not long ago. Originally, he needed dozens of years of accumulation before he could advance once more. However, The bloodline mutation in the 9 extreme death jail allowed him to have enough Dao cultivation accumulation. At this moment, he coincidentally grasped a technique that could quickly raise his cultivation without many problems. He took out the book of Ian Extreme Life. He flipped it to the 5th page. Zhongsho hesitated once more. The book of Ian had a total of 9 pages, corresponding to body, earth, heaven, spirit, celestial, God, saint, end, and true realms. At this moment, his cultivation corresponded to the 5th page. Not long ago in Sonling World, not long after he broke through to Celestial Realm, he had already flipped it open. Apart from more profound fate and time techniques, there were also 2 techniques that were really important to Zhongsho. One was to control the Book of Ian, to throw in more Mind Stones and Celestial Stones to increase the speed of time by 100 times. However, the consumption ratio wasn't at a multiplicative level, but at a geometric level. It consumed so much that even Zhongsho felt heartache. It wasn't worth it at all. The other was to turn back time. It could cause the soul of the caster to return to a certain period of time, to fully recover and experience everything he had seen. However, he couldn't move and couldn't do anything. He could only look on. It also required more celestial stones and spells, but Zhongsho didn't lack any of that. However, apart from that, he also needed to consume 300 years of lifespan. Before this, Zhongsho had been hesitating and unwilling to do so. At this moment, he had no choice. It really makes one feel conflicted. After stepping into the celestial realm, I finally gained 4,000 years of lifespan. This time, I will probably use it all up. From spirit realm to celestial realm, depending on one's talents, it would increase lifespan by 1,600 to 2,000 years. Zhongsho's physical body was similar to the indestructible body of a God Realm expert and was recorded in the mysterious Golden Life Book. This was why the moment he entered the celestial realm, his lifespan increased by 4,000 years. If his calculations were correct, then this time, he would need to consume at least 3,000 years of lifespan. Breaking out into a laugh, Zhongsho closed the Book of Ian. It wasn't that he wanted to back out, but that he had made up his mind. He would use these 3,000 years of lifespan to take a gamble. However, to use this technique, he needed a long time to calm down, and he also needed experts like A.O. Kuan to protect him. He still had many things to do, and it wasn't time yet. Chapter 1000. Roughly half a month later, the Deqian Celestial Dynasty's territory was finally settled. Yuanren and the surrounding 47 worlds were all occupied. Along with Kuei Xian leading the troops, they crazily attacked within the Judu Xianting country. Using the Tai God Lightning ships and Cold Crystal Shadow Blade ships, they were several times faster than normal spaceships. In 20 days, they took down a total of 26 worlds, amongst which there were even 2 medium worlds. However, at this point, the surrounding powers all reacted. On one side, they pressured the Qian country and moved troops into the country. On the other hand, they worked together to swiftly split up the remaining land of Judu Xianting. Kuei Xian had too few troops, so he could only helplessly stop and turn to defense. Actually, he was unable to take down more. The portion of land that he took from Judu Xianting was far away from Yuanren World and wasn't connected to it. It was also entangled with the other powers. How to rule was a problem, and how to defend was even more problematic. It was easy to occupy, but they might not be able to defend. Zhongsho was actually really satisfied with Kuei Xian's decision to stop while he was ahead. At this moment, Great Gon had a total of 5 middle worlds and 69 small worlds. It was starting to take shape. The area close to Yuanren was one of the few rich lands. In the last life, that person had used the wealth and manpower of this place to rise up. In just a few years, he would be able to gather up the strength of the country. What made Zhongsho happy were the blacksmiths that the 9 capital celestial dynasty supported. Ilingsu's family really had a huge influence. Through this person's persuasion, close to 70% of them agreed to move to Yuanren. The number of Cold Crystal Shadow Blade ships that joined them was also more than expected, a total of 16 of them. Without the 9 capital extreme blade warriors in charge of these ships, they lost a lot of their value. However, they had peak Sciention realm combat strength and were several times faster than normal ships, so they still had a lot of value. Normal celestial dynasties and cultivation factions would send one person to be the lord of a world. Apart from being in charge of defense, they would also have to hand over a large portion of their production. When one's cultivation reached the deity realm, one would usually ignore worldly affairs and would not be willing to lightly touch the power of karma. Therefore, the realm lord candidates were usually chosen from intermediate immortal realm cultivators. Zhongshu's Deqian celestial dynasty was different. There was no realm lord position. Based on the system that Zhongshu and Liu Wubing had discussed and decided on, every world would be divided into several countries. There were 3 to 5 people who could go to the Yuanren world and enter the conference hall. There was 1 overlord and 2 deputy generals. They didn't care about worldly affairs, only in charge of training and recruiting troops and nurturing cultivators of this world. There was also a governor, a political advisor, and a number of other officials such as the 100-flower emissary, the beast emissary, and so on. In addition to supervising, they were also in charge of collecting taxes, mediating disputes between countries and sects, cultivating all kinds of spirit herbs and spirit beasts, and nourishing spirit veins. The latter 2 were the most important. Normal government affairs would be handled by the various countries themselves. Only when the monarch is immoral, or when the monarch is muddle-headed, or when the people resent him. Only then would the Deqian interfere to fulfill the responsibility of the country. There was also the merchant emissary, who was in charge of all trade matters. The country policy was really relaxed. Although in essence, they were really plundering people, they were much gentler. This was why they didn't face much resistance in the new land they occupied. Most of the people of the various worlds were doubtful. Their attitudes were really careful as they tried to come into contact with the Deqian. At this point, the surrounding situation had slowly stabilized. The Honorable Ling Order, Jiju's Celestial Dynasty, and the League of the Seven either suffered heavy losses or had many problems of their own. Toward the rise of the Deqian, they wanted to, but they didn't have enough strength. The other powers were more or less wrapped up in the fight for land under Judu Xianting. All of a sudden, they didn't have time to bother about the Deqian. Logically speaking, there were still numerous things to do: expanding the Dao soldiers, increasing military strength, recruiting cultivators, etc. Zhongshu didn't bother anymore, tossing aside everything that he had to do. Coincidentally, at this moment, the 9 Tai God Lightning ships were brought back to the Cloud World by Shi Ruolin. The troops that were scattered all around were also moved back. Roughly 10,000 Big Dipper sword soldiers, 3,000 Black Fox Iron Cavalry, and a set of Source Ocean Big Dipper Imperial Demon slaying sword formation. Zhongshu directly set off and left the Yuanren world. What he obtained last time included Lu Mukin's ship. Not only was it extravagant and beautiful, but it was also really practical. Its speed was no weaker than a celestial-grade artifact. It was also a warship. Its combat strength was comparable to 5 to 6 Earth-grade warships added together. Naturally, its value couldn't be compared to the Royal Demon God shuttle, but in terms of comfort, it was several times better. This time, Zhongshu wanted to follow the army and wasn't in a rush. He decided to move onto the giant ship that he had renamed Gantian and use it as his ship. Along with him were Ao Kuan and Ao E. Zhongshu, are you really going to do such a stupid thing? 3,000 years of lifespan. That isn't a joke. Within the room, Zhongshu sat alone in the center. Ao Kuan and Ao E each sat on one side. Ao E's expression was expressionless. She didn't have much of a relationship with Zhongshu. It was only because of Ao Kuan that she came into contact with Zhongshu. Ao Kuan owed Zhongshu too much, and she remembered it in her heart. No matter what Zhongshu needed, she would try her best to help and wouldn't say much. Everything was Zhongshu's choice, and she didn't need to interfere. Ao Kuan's face was filled with unhappiness. You Zhongshu have done enough for Tsang Shengdao. You have a clear conscience now. Why do you need to take such a risk? Even if you're lucky and succeed, you can temporarily have Saint Realm strength. However, at this moment, the common people's path doesn't make much of a difference with or without you. Why do you need to do that? His words were filled with rage, but he also didn't understand what Zhong Shou was doing. Brother Ao, without Song Xingdao, there wouldn't be Zhong Shou today. I can't say that I have done something for Song Xingdao and feel at ease. I knew that Song Xingdao was in danger of being wiped out, but I didn't do anything. Although I don't agree with Song Xingdao's ideals of equality, Zhong Shou is grateful. Zhong Shou shook his head and didn't think much of it. Besides, even if it wasn't for this kindness, just for you and Brother Ao, I can't just stand by and do nothing. This time, Long Ying, Master and Brother Ao also want to help Song Xingdao, right? Ao Kuan was stunned and then kept silent. Who asked him to away Su a favor? This time, even if he knew that Song Xingdao was most likely going to lose, he still had a rush over. If he didn't pay back his debt this time, he probably wouldn't have a chance to do so in the future. If he was like that, then Dragon Shadow was probably like that too. Ao, he was also slightly moved and looked at Zhong Shou in surprise. The two of them were really loyal to each other and had a strong sense of loyalty. This is why this Song Xingdao calamity, no matter if I am willing or not, Zhong Shou is going to be dragged in. Zhong Shou broke into a laugh. His eyes were filled with calmness about life and death. Moreover, it is just 3,000 years of lifespan. It isn't for nothing. It is for real cultivation. So why wouldn't I be willing? Even if I use it, I still have 1,000 years left. There is no rush. 1,000 years left? You really don't care at all. Ao Kuan scoffed coldly. Other people want to live longer when they cultivate. You, on the other hand, don't care at all. After Celestial Realm, there is God Realm. After God Realm, there is Saint Realm. You, Zhong Shou, can at most live for 10,000 years. Can you guarantee that you will be able to break through those tribulations and those cultivation barriers in that amount of time? With your talent, if you follow the normal path, you will become a Saint Venerable in a few thousand years. Why are you in such a rush? Li Wuke stepped into End Realm in 2,000 years. Does Brother Ao think that I am not as good as him? After End Realm, I will be able to live a long life. Why would I care about these 3,000 years? Zhong Shou's expression was still really calm. He had an attitude like he was really rich in the future, so he could squander it all now. Zhong Shou is impatient and doesn't want to take things step by step. He wants to waste time in cultivation. The future is dangerous and 10,000 years is too long. Zhong Shou is willing to fight for time. There was one more thing that he didn't say. If this technique could succeed, he would definitely be able to perfect Alcuin's existence and destruction technique. Even Ao, he would benefit from it. However, he knew that if Ao Kuan found out, his brother definitely wouldn't agree. No matter how one looked at it, he would be sacrificing his lifespan to complete his Tao. If he didn't say anything now, when it started, naturally he would let him do whatever he wanted. Ao Kuan wouldn't be able to regret, even if he wanted to. Of course, Li Wuke can't compare to you. However, when you step into End Realm, don't end up like him. Your foundations aren't stable, and your Tao path isn't complete. When Zhong Shou heard this, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. With Li Wuke as an example, he was a little worried. However, this time he was determined and couldn't change his mind. Ao Kuan was furious and wanted to persuade him once more. However, his spiritual sense looked at Ao. Her expression was serious as she shook her head. He knew that he couldn't persuade him anymore and that there was no point in saying anything more. He scoffed in annoyance. Forget it. I will let you do as you wish. There won't be a next time. His tone was really firm. If Zhong Shou was still like this and didn't care about his lifespan, it would be better for him to personally slap his sworn brother to death and end this matter once and for all. I don't dare to guarantee that. When Zhong Shou heard this, he laughed out loud. In the eyes of others, this is a fortuitous encounter that can't be found even if one holds a lantern. However, you're the one who is anxious for me. The Mind Stone formation was laid out long ago. When Zhong Shou said this, his hands formed a seal and he moved. Numerous talisman patterns appeared in this 100-foot room and floated in the air. It flashed and passed. A surging spiritual wave charged all around. It was so thick that it seeped out of the formation and spread outside. The book of Ian Extreme Life that was placed at the core of the formation slowly floated up and flew in front of Zhongsho. Page by page, it flipped open, and coincidentally, it was the 5th page. It caused the time flow in this region to speed up by 100 times. These changes didn't stop. One by one, profound and mysterious characters appeared from the book. Above the book of Ian Extreme Life, a black mist ball formed. It was in the shape of a spiral. The moment it appeared, it pretty much sucked dry all the true chi and soul energy in Zhongsho's body. Just as he couldn't take it anymore, Ao Kuin and Ao E at the side. Each of them sent in a wave of power. Zhongsho smiled and started to chant. 10. Tao. Rule. Ceremony. Xian. Law. Space. 7 mantras and 7 hand seals instantly raised the level of the spell to a whole new level. Within Zhongsho's soul, it exploded out like thunder. It was sucked in by a strong power and brought into an unknown place. It was in chaos. When he focused his eyes once more, he saw a patch of chaos opening up. It was the scene he had seen on the world viewing instrument a few years ago. The scene of the absolute beginning. Chapter 1001. His mind was in a mess. When he focused his eyes once more, what he saw was chaos opening up, coincidentally the scenes he saw on the world viewing instrument a few years ago. Absolute beginning scenes. A few years later, he was able to see it once more. The shock in Zhongsho Shin's heart was still indescribable. What was more shocking was the ability of the Book of Ian. This Book of Ian Extreme Life could really turn back time, bringing his soul back to a few years ago. He used the world viewing instrument to see when the absolute beginning opened up. He burst out laughing. This Book of Ian could even forcefully pull someone like him, who should have been beheaded, out of the fate of death. Then, what else couldn't it do? This was just a trip back in time. In fact, it wasn't much. However, this time, he had used up 500 years of his lifespan just to use this technique. Who knows what price Zhong Weiran had to pay at that time? He could have reached the Saint Realm in one step, but his cultivation fell below Spirit Realm. In the end, he was even surrounded and killed. Thinking about it now, he felt like he owed his father too much. A spiritual sense suddenly spread over, breaking Zhongsho's thoughts. Is this the scene of the absolute beginning opening up? When you were in the 3rd Dragon Hall and coincidentally found the world viewing instrument. At this moment, there was another Zhongsho standing beside Zhongsho. However, he was in a daze as he looked into the distance. It was obvious that he was trying his best to memorize and comprehend everything that he was seeing. Zhongsho only felt that there was an unknown power around him that was restricting him. There seemed to be a layer separating him from the things around. He couldn't come into contact with them and naturally couldn't be affected. His heart was filled with regret. Thinking about this moment, if he could appear and teach this Zhongsho from a few years ago, then wouldn't he be even stronger now? Even if he sent a message over to remind Wei Su, then Song Xingdao wouldn't have ended up in such a situation. However, he couldn't break through this layer. That would definitely be at the cost of 10,000 years of lifespan and tens of millions of immortal stones. Zhongsho did not have that kind of wealth, nor did he have that much lifespan to squander. What a pity, what a pity. Just as he was sighing slightly, the thought that had touched him seemed to be extremely dissatisfied. Wave after wave of soul pressure rolled over. Zhongsho had no choice but to answer him telepathically. Ao Kuin, you still have the mood to talk to me at a time like this? Every minute that I miss is a waste of Zhongsho's lifespan. Don't you think you're letting me down? The Book of Ian Extreme Life didn't just bring his soul back to a few years ago. Ao Kuin and Ao E also came along. The heavenly warship had dozens of warships and an entire army protecting it. With Yi Xian overseeing it, there was no need to worry about its safety. The so-called Dharma Protector was in times of crisis. To safely bring his soul back to the main world from a few years ago. Unless one was half a step to end realm like AoE, one wouldn't be able to do that. Ao Kuin's cultivation was a little weaker, but this dragon had instant space dragon blood. Zhongshou, you jerk. Ear alone is enough. Are you afraid that I don't owe you enough? Sooner or later, I will settle the score with you. Ao Kuin scolded out, but in the end, he kept silent. Just like how Zhongshou saw it, it would be a waste to miss even a little bit. The absolute beginning world was really important to Ao Kuin. The only weakness of his existence and destruction technique was that the creation laws weren't complete. The scenes of the absolute beginning were much stronger than Zhongshou's world creation phenomenon. Naturally, the benefits couldn't be compared to it. Zhongshou smiled and didn't say a word, bringing Ao Kuin over. He did so to add a layer of insurance, but also because of his own selfishness. He thought that if Ao Kuin could complete the technique, he might be able to help Yuan Jing complete her Dao foundations. At that time, Song Xingdao and the other two end realms would rely on the common people's vast habitat to fight against the Taoist faction. Moreover, he also had Hanshi, that natural variant. At this moment, it had crossed two realms and had a long lifespan. At this moment, what he felt most fortunate about was that life and death contract. However, if that Ant Queen found out about such a thought, she might directly use her arm to chop him up. On the other side, he didn't say anything. From start to finish, she kept silent. Pretty much all her attention was focused on the scenes opposite when the origin exploded. She didn't need to look at the entire situation, she just needed to see how the ice laws were produced. How could it coexist with the other laws of the heavens? Zhongshou tossed aside all his random thoughts and looked forward. Boundless energy surged out from the black dot. It swiftly expanded outwards, many lines and dots intersecting with one another. Numerous substances were formed and then pushed into the distance. A newly born world was starting to take shape. A few years ago, Zhongshou had seen it once. However, at this moment, it was a totally different feeling. The same detail, he was able to comprehend more theories and correct his mistakes in the past. He could also view the entire situation, including the scenes of the origin exploding. Everything was within his spiritual sense. That year, his cultivation wasn't enough, and he could only be careful. Even if he went all out, his memory was still limited. He also had to try his best to neglect many things in case he used up too much of his life energy. At this moment, Zhongshou didn't have anything to worry about. Like a bottomless sponge, greedily absorbing everything in front of him. He tried his best to comprehend what he could. What he couldn't, he memorized and left for the future. He didn't want to let go of any changes, any laws that were formed. Even if it was a speck of dust, its trajectory, temperature, etc., he remembered it in his heart. One could see the big from the small, one could see the whole leopard. These seemingly insignificant things could be deduced into countless pieces of information and principles. As for whether or not his soul would be scattered by the power of the origin world, Zhongshou didn't care at all. Within the Gantian giant ship, in the cultivation room, time slowly flowed. At this moment, it had been close to a month since Zhongshou used the time reversal technique. It had only been 2 hours since he had truly returned to the past. When Ao Kuin and Ao protected Zhongshou from a few years ago, they pulled it back to the present. The few of them entered a meditative state at the same time. They weren't willing to waste even a bit of time and didn't have time to talk. They were afraid that what they comprehended during that period of time would be forgotten because of this. Zhongshou was like that. Ao Kuin and Ao were no exception. A month in the outside world was 100 times the time in this room. Unknowingly, 8 years had passed. On this day, the celestial stones scattered around the room all exploded. The book of Ian Extreme Life's spiritual energy was totally used up. It couldn't hold on anymore and fell from midair. Zhongshou's body shook, waking up from his meditation. Chapter 1002. Looking at the book of Ian that fell in front of him, Zhongshou's eyes were filled with melancholy. He thought to himself that 3,000 years of lifespan, thousands of celestial stones were all gone just like that. Sighing emotionally, Zhongsho looked into his body. 8 years of cultivation and internal energy surged like a flood. Intermediate celestial realm. Zhongsho had stepped on this line a year ago. The forbidden technique of the 9 extreme death jail had tempered his body, vital energy, and soul. The stimulation and improvement of his bloodline, as well as the influence of the absolute beginning along with these few years of silent cultivation. It caused both his martial and spirit paths to cross intermediate celestial realm. However, at this moment, he had only just stabilized. It was far from what he expected to be able to charge to the peak of intermediate celestial realm. Zhongsho couldn't help but sigh. As expected, after celestial realm, even half a step was extremely tough. He had the pure bloodline of the sky-burning Liu family and also obtained the legacy of the Qilin and Liu family. If it was still so tough for him to advance, then one could imagine what would happen to other people. In the future, each step would take hundreds and thousands of years. This time, he had used the absolute beginning scenes to impact his soul to break through his cultivation barrier. It was impossible for him to be able to advance so quickly in the future. Zhongsho didn't dare to take the risk anymore. This wasn't a joke. Once his foundations were unstable, he would need dozens of times more time to make up for it. Demon Path cultivation was extremely fast at the start, but the further one went, the slower one would be. If he didn't have no choice, he would rather use 10 to 20 years to cross this obstacle. After checking, Zhongsho took out the nameless sword. A sharp buzzing sound spread out in the room. The sword body was blood red, but there was a 3-foot green energy gathered at the tip of the sword. At the same time, there was also a vast and magnificent sword essence that spread out. Although Zhongsho purposely retracted it and focused on the tip of the sword. However, there was still a portion that spread out. The wood that made this giant ship as tough as a celestial artifact couldn't support it. A series of ear-piercing, creaking noises could be heard as it shook incessantly. His own cultivation realm was actually nothing to him. Although it was important, there was no rush. If one wanted to borrow King Path martial arts to possess battle prowess comparable to a Saint Realm expert, the first thing one needed to do was to utilize the force of the martial Tao. There were many monarchs of small countries who did not have the support of powerful cultivators. When Shao Chun executed King Dao martial techniques, he only used them in a simple manner. He had not even grasped the method to condense the force into one. Against low-level cultivators, they could crush them with force, but against cultivators of the same level, they would often be forced into a sorry state. What Zhongsho had learned was the Emperor's Wind technique. It was the most neutral and peaceful, and after mastering it, it would also be the most majestic. And during normal cultivation, this top-tier King Path secret technique could allow a person to naturally grasp the flow and use of force, not any weaker than normal cultivators. It even had the effect of prolonging one's lifespan, unlike cultivators who could live forever. However, when one reached the extreme of the 13th level, one would have a lifespan of 2,000 years. Naturally, all of this was useless to Zhongsho. Martial path intent, comprehended to the intermediate spirit realm, one's control of the martial path could be said to have reached the peak. However, Zhongsho was not satisfied with this. To truly go up against those Saint Realm experts, he was still far from it. He was also used to using 1% of his strength to 3%, 5%, or even 12%. If he wanted to make a difference in Wei Su's tribulation and even try to turn the tides, he had to have a breakthrough. He had to have a breakthrough in the sword path and grasp a stronger sword intent. After a buzzing sound, the sword energy on the nameless sword retracted once more. However, not only did the aura not decrease, but it became even more vast and majestic. This time he used 3,000 years of lifespan as the price to view the absolute beginning, although he was unable to raise the level of the sword intent. However, the sword intent had obviously changed, going through the cleansing of the absolute beginning scenery. He removed much of the redundancy, but didn't refine it. Apart from that, he also added many things. Each small change in the sword intent in his hand could affect the mysteries of heaven and earth. It was also more agile. The sword intent had a complete soul, like it was a living being. His cultivation wasn't enough, so this strong martial path sword technique was the foundation of his current standing. Although he hadn't broken through, he had already touched the chance to change. 3,000 years of lifespan not only allowed him to return to the past, but it also included everything that was consumed when he opened up the absolute beginning. He just needed a few more years to comprehend it all and merge it all together. Then, naturally, breaking through would happen naturally. When I was in the celestial realm, my sword intent had a chance to enter the god realm. Even if I said this, no one would believe me. From ancient times till now. Even if I can't say that there won't be anyone in the future, there definitely won't be anyone in the past. Ao, who was at the side, also woke up. She looked at the sword in Zhongsho's hand in shock. Then, she smiled gratefully. Thank you, Brother Shou. I owe you a huge favor. Although I cultivate the Ice Grand Tao, I still dream of this grand primordial realm. In just 2 hours, it is comparable to 800 years of cultivation for me. Ao. As for the end realm tribulation, I have a little more confidence. Her eyes were in a daze like she was in a dream. That is the world viewing instrument? The god treasure that Shi Zi and the Mahists worked together to craft? It really is extraordinary. Even after experiencing it once, Ao still felt that it wasn't enough and wanted to see it once more. Who knows where this god treasure is now? For you to be able to meet such a rare opportunity, you are really lucky. Zhongsho was stunned when he heard this. So, this world viewing instrument wasn't just a Mahis artifact. That year, Shizi also participated in it. Ao Kuen's annoyed voice spread out from the side. See it once more? My brother is about to return to dust to dust. When Ao heard this, she smiled and didn't say anything. Ao Kuen turned to Zhongsho with a complicated expression. He wanted to scold him, but in the end, he sighed, I can't thank you enough. There is no need for that between us. However, in the future, I hope that before you do such things, you will discuss with me. Don't let Ao Kuen feel guilty. If not, we won't be brothers anymore. Zhongsho's expression instantly turned serious, and he could hear the seriousness in Ao Kuen's words. He smiled bitterly in his heart and solemnly nodded his head. Then he asked curiously, How is it? Thanks to you, it can be considered complete. Although he said that, Ao Kuen's face was filled with uncontrollable joy and excitement. I'm still too far away from Endrealm. However, if I can get enough dragon pellets and dragon souls, I can take another step and step into late Saint Realm. When Ao heard this, her eyes dimmed. At this moment, Ao Kuen obviously didn't treat himself as a member of the dragon race. When he talked about snatching dragon pellets and dragon souls, he didn't feel any guilt at all. He was really sad and had given up all hope on the dragon race. He was also worried about the dragon swallowing technique that Ao Kuen cultivated. If he suffered a backlash in the future, who knew what to do? There were also the 4 dragon halls who knew that Ao Kuen had appeared in the world and would definitely think of ways to kill him. At this moment, although the dragon race was weak, there were still a few ancient end realm existences. Normal Saint Realm experts couldn't do anything to the 2 of them. However, if those few attacked, it would be tough for them to even reincarnate. Zhongsho had another opinion. I am envious of Brother Ao. Thinking about it, this existence and destruction technique is probably the only Grand Tao ability in the world that can be learned quickly. Other people have to worry about their foundations being incomplete, but Brother Ao doesn't have such a problem. When he reaches the peak, he can naturally make up for it. He only has to worry about the backlash of the dragon swallowing technique. He was a little envious. He cultivated the 10,000 Tao merger technique, and probably after his cultivation reached Saint Realm, he would be able to grasp a portion of the existence and destruction technique. However, he definitely wouldn't be as pure as Ao Kuen. Zhongsho naturally didn't have much confidence in using the ability to make up for his end realm foundations. That's right. Ao Kun laughed. His tone and expression were really open. Unfortunately, although I was able to make up for a large portion of the creation technique, I'm still a little lacking. As for the dragon swallowing backlash, he laughed. His tone wasn't one of disdain and not caring. There was also no uneasiness at all. He was really calm, like he was looking at the world with a smile. When Zhongshou and Aoe heard this, they exchanged glances with one another. They could see the calmness in each other's eyes. Dealing with the Dragon Soul backlash was pretty much the same as dealing with a Heart Demon. Although it couldn't change like the Heart Demon, the Dragon Soul was much stronger. Hundreds of them working together would strike the soul. One could imagine the pressure. Apart from having a strong soul sense, one also had to have a calm heart. At this moment, Ao Kun obviously understood the essence of it. When Ao Kun saw this, he instantly broke into a laugh. I have already taken half of the revenge from the past. There is still hope for the other half. I just need to take it step by step. Naturally, I won't be anxious about it. As long as I don't care, those pieces of trash can't do anything to me. Since that is the case, then what do the two of you have to worry about? Anyway, be careful. After saying this, Zhongshou didn't say anything more. He believed that Ao Kun knew what to do. Then, he looked at the mess in the room with a regretful gaze. He was really satisfied with the results of this month of cultivation. However, when he looked at the shattered celestial stone dust in the room, Zhongshou couldn't help but feel pain in his heart. His face was ashen white. 7,400 celestial stones, the things he obtained from Lu Mukin and the others, along with the celestial stones that had recovered some spiritual energy, were all used here. At this moment, it was all used up. It had totally collapsed. These celestial stones were unable to recover and replenish spiritual energy. Long ago, when Zhongshou activated the time reversal technique, the violent time power had already destroyed the structure of the time pillar. It was destined to shatter. In the following time, it would just release the spiritual energy stored within. Since he obtained the Book of Ian, he had no fate with riches and mind stones and celestial stones. Often, when he got them, before he could even warm them up, he would fall back into a poor state. Giving out a self-mocking laugh, Zhongshou's eyes shone brightly. His blood eyes pierced through the void and looked outside of the giant boat. Not far from here was the celestial world. Now he was eyeing the celestial order, the riches accumulated over these 10,000 years. It would definitely fill up his heaven and earth bag once more. Chapter 1003. The celestial world was prosperous and prosperous. Pretty much at every moment, there were dozens of spaceships and hundreds of cultivators who could travel through the void, entering and exiting the world river. However, when the 9 Tai God Lightning ships and the Gantian giant boat formed up a fleet, they all felt that something was wrong. The nearby people all felt that something wasn't right. The spaceships that appeared all left. There were also no cultivators who dared to travel alone at this moment. Outside of the celestial world space, there were close to 60 ships that were waiting solemnly. Not only were there many large and sturdy warships, but there were also 16 Earth-grade warships similar to the Tai God Lightning ship. This is the 9 Bright Broken Star ship, the one that is on the same level as the Tai God Lightning ship. Zhongshou sat at the bow of the giant ship on the throne that was specially made for him and exclaimed, "This celestial order was really rich, so rich that they were overflowing with oil." The combat strength of the 9 Bright Broken Star ship could be compared to the Tai God Lightning ship. However, the cost was 20% more than the Cold Crystal Shadowblade ship. If one bought it, it would only be more expensive. As for the latter, there were only around 70 Judu Xianing ships in hundreds of worlds. However, the Celestial Order only had 10 places, and they had a quarter of the combat strength of the Judu Xianing ships. It really made one drool. However, it was said that only in these 1,000 years did it slowly become prosperous. In the past, the nearby worlds were mostly in a barbaric era. This was why, although the celestial world was located at an important place and connected to dozens of world rivers, it wasn't valued, and its income wasn't much. During these few hundred years, it wasn't that no one was eyeing it. It was only because they were wary of one another and worried about the attacks of the night demon race and the shadow demon race that the Celestial Order was able to remain independent till now. Furthermore, his own strength was not weak either. Thus, he should have his own backing behind him. If it didn't have enough strength, how could it survive till now with so many experts around it? Zhongsho was too lazy to bother. He didn't care how strong this celestial world was. No matter who was standing behind him, he would crush them with a single punch. Since no one wanted to eat this piece of meat, he would eat it first. Why aren't you wiping your mouth? You're almost drooling. Zhao Yanran's voice came from the side, startling Zhongsho. She subconsciously wiped the corner of her lips and realized that she had been fooled. Thus, he turned his head and glared fiercely at the crazy woman. Naturally, the latter did not care. Zhongsho, you've only been in seclusion for a month. Why do I feel like you become a different person? Osamu Hara, who was standing at the side, could not help but ask in confusion. The so-called change in personality did not refer to Zhongsho's personality in words, but to Zhongsho's temperament at the moment. He was still a little lazy, but in Yuan Wushang's eyes, he could feel the changes within. It was like Zhongsho himself was still unable to control it. However, the intent that occasionally leaked out gave one a vast and boundless feeling. I've gained something in a month. Zhongsho smiled humbly. Unfortunately, Osamu Hara's cultivation was not enough. Without the Book of Ian protecting him, his soul would not be able to travel through space. If not, just based on how Osamu Hara risked his life to report to him, he was willing to consume his lifespan to bring him to the world viewing instrument a few years ago. In terms of gains in this month, it was not much. There were more effects that would be shown in the future. Osamu Hara looked at Zhongsho suspiciously and felt that his cultivation had increased. However, the vigorous life force from before had also dissipated by a lot. Shaking his head in confusion, Osamu Hara did not want to continue asking. If you need my help in this battle, just say the word. The jade puppet beside him looked a little shabby at this moment, but it still had the strength of a saint-level powerhouse. It could fight 7 to 8 peak celestial realm experts. Even god realm cultivators had the ability to take it on. Zhongsho nodded his head solemnly. If he had no choice, he definitely wouldn't be courteous to Osamu Hara. Following that, he released his true power, and with a roll, he brought a human figure in front of him. It was Tanjing. His hair was in a mess, his face was withered, and his body was covered in wounds. Time after time, he broke the contract and schemed, making Zhongsho totally annoyed with this person. That day when Lai Ke surrendered, Zhuang Yu also killed Hong Jiuqin and the others. Everyone else could die easily. Only Tanjing was left behind. Zhongsho specially handed him over to the people who specialized in interrogating and extorting confessions to use all sorts of methods to torture him. Until he was prepared to get up and leave this celestial world, Zhongsho brought this person out. At that time, this person was on his last breaths and only had one breath left. However, looking at the current situation, after a month of rest, the Celestial Order Elder had already recovered a little. Brother Tan, the Celestial World is in front of us, your old base. However, it seems like your Celestial Order people don't like me coming here. Knife and spear raised. Swords drawn. This isn't the way to treat a guest. As he said that, Zhongsho waved his sleeves and released the restrictions on Tanjing's body. Brother Tan, please be my envoy and make a trip over on my behalf. Tell your fellow cultivators that I have to get this celestial world. If they are willing to surrender, I can allow them and their race to leave safely. I have half a day. Half a day later, I will attack. When Tanjing heard that, his face was ashen white. He knew that if he really listened to Zhongsho's words and went over, he would have no chance of surviving. His situation was even worse than the torture he had to face on Zhongsho's side. The Celestial Order worked so hard, close to 30,000 Dao soldiers were all buried in the Yuanren world. This was not only the hard work of the Celestial Order using numerous Mind Stones and pills. There were also numerous disciples and juniors within the Celestial Order. There were also close to 100 spirit realm cultivators and dozens of celestial realm cultivators. Half of them fell. The few god realm cultivators either died or surrendered. Since the celestial order was built, it had never suffered such heavy losses. It even shook its foundations. This calamity of being attacked by Zhongsho's army was also because he had offended Zhongsho many times. One could imagine that at this moment, numerous people wanted to eat Tanjing's flesh and drink his blood. However, he also knew that Zhongsho hated him to the bone. Begging was useless. Thinking about it for a moment, Tanjing made a decision. Bowing, Tanjing coincidentally learned a huge secret that might be beneficial to Ruler. I only hope that Ruler can let me live, or give Tanjing a quick death. Zhongsho placed restrictions in his body. Without this person's permission, even if Tanjing wanted to die, he couldn't. Regret rose up in his heart. If he knew that this would happen, he wouldn't have mixed with that useless Hong Jiuchen. If he had high hopes for Zhongsho and worked with him, things might have been different now. However, at this moment, what was the use of regretting? Who would have thought that the 9-capital celestial emperor Lu Mukin would end up in such a state after using the strength of an entire country? Huge secret? Zhongsho looked over with interest. Thinking to himself, did this Tanjing start to spout nonsense and despair to save his life? However, looking at him, he didn't look like he was lying and was filled with confidence. You can tell me about it. If it can satisfy me, then it is okay. However, if you aren't willing, then forget it. I won't allow you to bargain here. Tanjing took in a deep breath and said without hesitation, I heard that this Yuanren world has a chance to upgrade to a large-sized world in a short period of time. That Juda Xianing spent so much effort and pretty much used the strength of a country after learning about it. The moment he said this, everyone present was moved. Even Osamu Hara, who wasn't interested in such matters, looked over with a weird expression. Upgrade to a large-sized world? That was a little shocking. A large-sized world, even the weakest, had the same amount of resources as 10 medium-sized worlds. The stronger ones could even have 20 to 30 times of difference. The Liu family had 800 worlds, but there were only 9 large-sized worlds. The biggest one was the sky-burning Saint Dynasty. The other 8 were the capitals of the 8 countries. The meaning wasn't just that it was rich in resources. The living beings born in the large-sized worlds usually had a spirituality that other worlds couldn't compare to. This was why god beasts loved to give birth in worlds with rich spiritual energy. The cloud world was one of the top. Just end realm cultivators, along with those who were either missing or were forming their souls after falling. There were 14 of them. Not long later, there would be 2 more. One cloud world could provide for several end realm god venerables. As for other worlds, even 100 medium-sized worlds added together might not be able to do so. After knowing all this, one could imagine the horror in everyone's hearts. Zhongsho was also startled. In his memory, he didn't remember such a thing happening. The Yuanren world was originally the top of the medium-sized worlds. However, this world upgrading to large-sized worlds was naturally done 1,000 years later. In a short 300 years, it expanded by 60,000 miles. Such a majestic sight attracted numerous cultivators to head over. It was a huge matter that shocked the entire cultivation world. This was why he remembered all of this clearly. His first thought was that he suspected that Tanjing was lying. Looking closely, this person was afraid that he wouldn't believe him. So he hurriedly opened his mouth. Tanjing definitely wouldn't dare to speak nonsense. There is no lie at all. If there is a mistake after you investigate, Ruler will have many ways to punish me. Why is Tanjing asking for trouble? Zhongsho squinted and looked towards Lai Quebec. The latter had worked for Judu Xianing and might know some things. Lai Ke took in a deep breath and then bowed. Lai Ke heard some rumors. Lu Mukin seems to want to move the capital to the Yuanren world. Although the Yuanren world is rich, this matter is still a little weird. Comparing the two, what Tanjing said might be possible. The moment he said this, Zifeng, Tai Chi, and the others who followed Zhongsho all stared at Tanjing with fiery gazes. A large-sized world, even if it was weaker than the cloud world. To them, it still had huge value. It meant that it was a place that could be used as a foundation. It meant that the disciples born in this world would have cultivation talent comparable to the cloud world. The various benefits were hard to describe. Chapter 1004. After looking at Tianjing, their gazes turned back to Zhongsho. Zhongsho followed along and continued to ask, "Then do you know the details?" In his heart, he was thinking, did that person not know about this too? However, he saw that Tianjing kept silent and didn't say anything. Zhongsho knew what he meant. It seemed like this person wasn't going to reveal the details at this time. Without knowing the details, even if Zhongsho knew that Yuanren had a chance to advance to the Greater Thousand Realm, he didn't know where to start. Laughing coldly in his heart, Zhongsho thought about it before tossing a few purple gold talismans over. This talisman can protect you and warn you. It will last for a period of time. Even if a Saint Realm attacks, they won't be able to hurt you. It wasn't something that belonged to him, but something that he took from Lu Mukin. Who knows whether or not it was made by Li Wuck, but it wasn't something that a Saint Realm cultivator could do. After tossing out these few talismans, his heart felt pained. He said expressionlessly, "After you go over, you can tell them that if anyone dares to touch you, I swear that I will wipe out their entire family. Whether or not you can keep your life will depend on Tianjing's ability to talk." This time, he was prepared to use peaceful means before resorting to force. He followed the rules and didn't give anyone a chance to criticize him. Logically speaking, even if the people of the Celestial Order ate the guts of a leopard, they wouldn't dare to touch his envoy. However, in case something happened, Zhongsho wasn't willing to risk the lives of his men. There was nothing more humiliating than sending Tianjing as the envoy. Similar to the previous time, he didn't think about the possibility of reconciling with him. He didn't expect that after occupying Tianfeng, there would be such a strong enemy who hated him to the bone, pointing a sword at his back. Tianjing didn't argue. His face filled with joy as he took those few golden talismans and bowed before leaving. He headed in the opposite direction. Looking deeply at his back, Tai Chi's brows furrowed slightly before he turned around and said, "If we can really advance to the Greater Thousand World, then we are really fortunate. To be able to follow the ruler, to open up the outer region, is the fortune of our Kenzo sect." Originally, the demon sect and Taoist sects had a share. Who knows how much they regretted it now? If news of Yuanren world advancing spread back, then the few people who interfered in this matter would feel really bad. At this moment, Tai felt really fortunate. His master was smart and had a good eye for people. Zhongsho smiled, but didn't say anything. He took it easy. If I get it, I will if I don't. It was better not to be happy too early before he was certain. In the next moment, a lazy and graceful figure quietly appeared behind him. It was Ruo Shui. She leaned over and whispered a few words in his ear. A solemn killing intent appeared on Zhongsho's face. It caused Tai Chi and Zifong to look over curiously. Zhongsho didn't plan to hide it from the two of them and casually explained, "A month ago, my two advisors guessed that the true power behind the celestial world might be the Taoist sect of the cloud world. With Dowling vast habitat helping them in the dark, they weren't taken down. They said that these few months might be my only chance and that there wouldn't be such a good thing in the future. I didn't believe them, so I told Ruo Shui to send people to investigate. During this month, when his army pressed down, the people in charge of the Tianfeng world contacted the cloud world the most. Every day, they would send many message talismans. There were even many secret meetings and visits. Without needing to know what these people were talking about, one would know that the relationship between the two sides was deep. Since the Taoist sect sent so many troops to the cloud world to force Tsang Shengdao, they wouldn't be able to do anything. They definitely wouldn't have the strength to care about anything else. Since that was the case, then before he returned to the cloud world, he would give them a heavy punch here. Tai Chi and Zifong kept silent. It seemed like the two of them had noticed something about this matter. They knew what was going on, but they didn't have any evidence. Long before they came here, their sect had reminded them. There was nothing to worry about. As long as it wasn't a subordinate relationship on the surface, they didn't need to care. even if Zhong Shou had a righteous cause in his hands. If he took down the Tianfeng world, the Taoist sect wouldn't have anything to say. They waited quietly for roughly 2 hours, only to see Tianjing's body return once more. His face was ashen white, but his complexion was still okay. He knew his place and handed the few talismans back. Only then did he open his mouth. "I didn't let you down. Ruler's words have been conveyed, and there is no mistake." However, the 5 guild heads of the Celestial Order all rejected at the same time. When they were negotiating, not only were their words rude, but they also scolded the guilty official. There were even people who suggested to use torture to kill the guilty official. However, after I conveyed Ruler's words, no one dared to personally attack, and I was able to return. Zhong Shou was delighted. His words were rude. Scolding the envoy, that was enough. Actually, if Tianjing died in the hands of the Celestial Order, that would be even better. Unfortunately, he was helpless and had to protect this person's life. Rejecting Ruler's terms, the people of the Celestial Order are confident in defending the Celestial World and have something to rely on. They don't dare to attack Tianjing because they are afraid of Ruler's strength. Zifeng half closed his eyes. "I want to congratulate Ruler. Although they aren't weak, they aren't of the same mind. After we take them down, we can easily wipe out future problems. Ruler's name has spread far and wide across the worlds." Zhong Shou shook his head. His name spread far and wide? What spread far and wide should be the top heir of the Liu family. The people of the Celestial Order should be worried about the Liu family. Tianjing dared to make this trip because he had something to rely on. Feeling a little unhappy in his heart, Zhong Shou scoffed and directly said to Shirulin, "We can begin." Shirulin's brow rose up in excitement. She casually tossed out, and dozens of command arrows turned into a ball of light that flew toward the other ships. The 9 Tai God Lightning ships and the few troop transport ships all slowly moved. They slowly increased their speed and sailed across. At the same time, another streak of light appeared in the sky. In front of the Gantian ship, 3 celestial realm breaths away, a person appeared. Chu Fuqing greets the Qian ruler. It was a swordsman dressed in luxurious clothing, around 30 years old. Although there was a huge army in front of him, his expression didn't change at all. The military books say that a ruler can't be angry and a general can't attack. "Ruler, before you act, can you listen to me?" Zhong Shou sat at the head of the ship and looked at this person weirdly. Where did this person pop out from? Who was this person? However, he wasn't surprised as he calmly shook his head. "I'm too lazy to listen." He directly turned around and said to Tai Chi, "Today's battle is up to the 2 of you." The 2 of them smiled and bowed. Chu Fuqing frowned. "I am here because of the League of the 7, Han Ling Order, the Court of Wandu, and Ocean Cloud Celestial Alliance. War is the life and death path of the country. Who can fight and who can't, we have to investigate. Ruler, don't make a mistake. The Celestial Order has thousands of years of accumulation and has the support of all sides. It isn't something you can shake." However, he couldn't continue and was totally silent. Only to see a moment later, hundreds of Celestial Realm cultivators flew out from the ship. They formed up. They were the Heaven Grade Tao soldiers of the Kinzo sect and the Buddhist faction. Chapter 1006. The top Heaven Grade Tao soldier of the Kinzo sect was known as the No Return Blade. It named itself after the blade. Since its Tao path was over, there was no return. Just this name gave off an extremely strong and sharp aura. A full 200 people lined up into 2 formations on the left of the squadron. It was the Heaven Stem Big Dipper No Return Sword Formation. The moment the formation was formed, 2 extremely sharp sword intents suppressed the area. The Buddhist faction Tao soldiers were 240 Guardian Vajras. In terms of combat strength, they were weaker than Zhong Shou's Source Ocean Demon-Slaying Warriors and the Kinzo sect's No Return Blade. However, the formation they formed was really extraordinary. It was known as the Maha Prajna Formation. When the formation was formed, there were many Buddhist chants and numerous lotuses blooming. All the guardian Vajras had really peaceful expressions on their faces. It was like that place had become a peaceful Buddhist country. Outside of the celestial world, within 30 celestial realm breaths, no spaceship cultivators are allowed to pass. Anyone who breaks this rule will be killed. After saying these words calmly, Zhongsho smiled and looked towards Chu Fuchen. I didn't pay attention just now. What did Venerable Chu say? Can you say it once more? Chu Fuchen sucked in a cold breath as he looked at the 3 heaven-grade Dao soldier formations beside Zhongsho. Not only these no-return blades and guardian Vajras, but there were also hundreds of Earth-grade Dao soldiers who all formed up. It wasn't as good as the first 2. However, just 100-people formation could go up against peak God Realm experts. Chu Fuchen only felt his scalp go numb and a cold intent struck his heart. He also felt fortunate that he wasn't careless this time. If not, he would have to retreat in a haggard manner. At this moment, he was helpless and could only repeat what he said. The Celestial Order has been accumulated for thousands of years and is really strong. With the support of all of us, how could Monarch be so easily shaken? Ruler sent troops over, and if you suffer heavy losses and return without any results, wouldn't that affect the reputation of the Deqian sect? This was something that a wise man would not do. This time, Chu Fuchen has been entrusted by the League of the Seven Nations, the Han Ling Order, the Court of Wandu, and the Sea Cloud Immortal Alliance to persuade you two to cease fighting. Peace is the most important thing in the world. Ruler, don't make a mistake. Just as he finished speaking, specks of light flickered in the distant void. Looking closely, there were dozens of Earth-grade warships of various styles flying over. There were at least 14 other Saint Realm auras rushing out from all directions. It seemed to be echoing Chu Fuchen's words from afar. His domineering aura seemed to be able to cover the heavens and the earth. They all spread over and locked down the 10 spaceships here. Zhongsho's lips twitched, then he shook his head and said, "So you're here to mediate. But why does it sound more like you're threatening me? If I don't retreat today, are you prepared to join forces and fight against the Qian? Are you trying to oppress me with your power?" Chu Fuchen kept silent as a silent agreement. His original intention was to threaten, but he was worried about Zhongsho's face, so he tried to hide his words. So what if he wanted to oppress him with his power? In this world, strength was the most important thing. No matter what Zhongsho thought, it didn't matter. The Deqian Celestial Dynasty had already occupied 70 parts of the world. If they occupied the Celestial world, it would be tough to stop them. This was why no matter what, he couldn't allow this person to succeed. Even if this person was the top heir of the Liu family sky-burning Saint Dynasty, he couldn't care so much. If he was afraid of the sky-burning Saint Dynasty and didn't dare to offend them. At that time, wouldn't the Liu family have already unified this region? Zhongsho's face turned cold and solemn as he said coldly, "Didn't I send envoys to state the terms of peace? Give up the celestial world and hand over those few people. Then this matter will be settled." Before he finished, Chu Fuchen interrupted him. "The celestial world is the foundation of the celestial order. Ruler's terms are a little too much. In my, Chu Fuchen's view, ruler's words are preposterous, unrealistic and greedy." He hesitated slightly, thinking about it for a moment before he opened his mouth. "If ruler thinks that I, Chu Fuchen, am threatening you, then it is okay. If ruler wants to do things your way today, then please be prepared. Fight the League of the Seven, Han Ling Order, the Court of Wandu, and Ocean Cloud Celestial Alliance. Prepare to be enemies. Once the war starts, people will be wiped out, and we won't stop until one side dies. It isn't something that you can stop just because you want to." Since this the Qian Celestial Dynasty ruler didn't know what was good for him, then he might as well make the current situation clear. At this moment, he could see that this Deqian ruler was talking nonsense with him. Either he was delaying time to think about countermeasures, or he was finding a way out for himself. Since he already guessed it, then why would he, Chu Fuchen, allow him to do as he wished? The moment he said those words, not only did Zhongsho's expression change, the expressions of the people on the spaceship all changed. Tai Chi sighed. He knew that Zhongsho wasn't a person who liked to talk too much with others. Today, he definitely had a reason for being patient and saying all this to this person. As expected, this Chu Fuchin venerable fell into a hole once more. In the next moment, Zhongsho laughed, turning around and looking over. His voice was filled with a forceful intent. Remember that I ordered that outside of the celestial world, no one is allowed to pass within 30 celestial realm breaths. Before he finished, a shout spread out from the space outside of the 30 celestial realm breaths. Those who go against it will be killed without mercy. Looking out, one could see an extremely bright sword light exploding out. It followed the 10 over-Earth-grade warships that were slowly heading towards the celestial world and charged over. It covered all of them, instantly covering all of them within. Layers of rainbow-colored shields immediately appeared on the warship to resist the attack. There were also many Dao soldiers who charged out of the ship, instantly forming a formation to block the sharp sword. The Saint Realm auras hidden around instantly became restless. However, at this moment, a cold scoff spread out from the void. It was Aoi who was at an unknown location. Just this scoff caused the temperature of the world river to drop by 30%. On the other hand, Alcuin couldn't be bothered to conceal his tracks, and he similarly appeared 20 breaths away and floated in the air. His handsome face was filled with a smile. I was entrusted by my brother Sho to stop all from passing today. If anyone is unhappy, you can fight with me, A.O. Cohen. Naturally, if your foundations are damaged, then don't blame me, A.O. Cohen. The 10 Saint Realm auras all stopped slightly, but they were still restless. A few of them were inches away from where the sword light rose up. However, at this moment, under the impact of the sword waterfall, a total of 3 Earth-grade warships exploded. A green-shirt person didn't fear the Saint Realm venerables who were obviously prepared to attack. The sword light retracted and his tracks were revealed. His eyes were filled with a smile as he bowed towards Zhongsho. Kenzo Sect Sikong Fo is late. Ruler, please forgive me. Today, outside of the celestial world, no one is allowed to pass within 30 celestial realm breaths. Those who go against it will be killed. Before he could finish his words, another figure walked over from another direction. Junior brother's sword is filled with warning intent. Aren't you a little too merciful? Hee hee. Once the battle starts, people will be wiped out and the Qian won't rest until one of us dies. Just your League of the Seven, Han Ling Order, the Court of Wandu, and Ocean Cloud Celestial Alliance? What arrogance! In front of this person were 10 Earth-grade warships. He didn't seem to do anything, but wherever he passed, 4 of the warships exploded. Fortunately, the 2 Sage Realm cultivators who had yet to show themselves had used their magic power to protect the rest of the warships in time. Under the clash of strength, huge waves rose up and sword energy spread all about. This person completely ignored him and continued to walk forward for another 10 steps before stopping. Kenzo Sect's Ren Dong greets ruler. I am under the orders of the sect leader to serve the Qian ruler. I have arrived long ago. This person's words really annoyed me. His face was filled with a cold smile, filled with disdain as he swept the void. There were at least 16 Saint Realm cultivators gathered here. There were many of them, but did they dare to sacrifice themselves to fight? They were just rats, not worth mentioning at all. The void was instantly silent. At this moment, only 4 Saint Realm cultivators appeared on Zhongsho's side, and they were able to suppress the entire battlefield. The pressure created by the combined efforts of more than a dozen Saint Realm experts was smashed into pieces, completely disappearing. However, in the next moment, an unlimited beginning and end Buddhist chant spread out from another part of the void. A monk appeared without any signs, stepping on a lotus and standing in the void. Based on the promise of the Qian Celestial Dynasty ruler, this celestial world will be one of our Buddhist faction temples. The Buddhist ancestor has already sent down a decree to order me to build the little Brahma temple in this world. Could it be that what you said just now is to make my Buddha return empty-handed? This really puts me in a tough spot. When he said this, the monk also bowed towards Zhongsho from afar. Buddhist faction Lanka is fortunate to have obtained the Buddhist faction Bodhisattva fruit. Based on the Buddhist ancestors' wishes, I will help the Grand Teacher to solve your problems. Following closely behind, another monk appeared on the other side. Buddhist faction Miao Di greets the ruler. This Bodhisattva, who is even more beautiful than a girl, also stepped on a lotus as he walked over. To stop my Buddhist light from shining here, Miao Di has to fight to the death. Brother Chu's words are infuriating. So what if we fight to the death? Miao Di's words were really nice to hear. At the same time, many seven-colored lotuses bloomed under the spaceships near him. They looked harmless, but were also really beautiful. However, they caused those sturdy Earth-grade spaceships to give out creaking sounds. There were actually traces of cracks appearing on the hull of the ship. The ship was splitting apart. My faction doesn't like to kill, but Buddhas have anger and angry eyes. I will give you 10 breaths to back out of this place. 10 breaths later, as the ruler said, outside of the celestial world, within 30 breaths of celestial realm speed, no spaceship cultivators are allowed to pass. Anyone who breaks this rule will be killed. At that time, don't blame me for not warning you, and kill me for not teaching you. After he finished, he looked towards Zhongsho apologetically. I really can't bear to kill, so I acted on my own accord. Please forgive me, Junshang. Zhongsho smiled and didn't mind. The Buddhist faction was just like that, dragging things out and not willing to be straightforward. If not, why would they be forced to such a state despite having the strength of the Taoist faction and Kinzo sect working together? Chapter 1007. Chu Fuchin's face was already purple-green. Who knows whether it was because he was so furious or because he was shocked. Ruler, what is the meaning of this? Do you really want to be enemies with the four of us? So what? We have already attacked, so why are you still talking so much? So noisy? Zhongsho waved his sleeves impatiently, his eyes filled with cold disdain. Didn't you threaten me? If you insist on attacking Tianfeng, then you won't rest until one of us dies. You think you are worthy? You Chu Fuchin, who are you to dare to come and mediate the battle between me and the Celestial Order? I have already attacked. If you want to fight, then fight. If you don't want to fight and die here, then scram. Chu Fuchin's face was ashen white, his body trembling slightly. Then, his face flushed red. His eyes were filled with fear as he looked at the four Saint Realm venerables of the Sword faction and Buddhist faction. If it was just Ao, Kuin, and Aoi, they would be able to suppress them if they worked together. Why did the Sword faction and Buddhist faction of the Cloud World interfere? Looking at the situation, it was obvious that they were going to help out. They also seemed to be working together without any animosity. He instantly understood that they had most probably lost today's matter. They had lost really badly. However, he didn't feel despair. In the past, the 5 factions of the Cloud World had many examples of them working together to open up the outer region. At the start, they could work together, but not long later, they would have conflicts of interest and they would fight with one another. The other factions in the Cloud World wouldn't allow the other factions to expand their power to feed the Cloud World. Without needing anyone to plot against them, this alliance would collapse on its own and could be easily solved. They temporarily lost today, but they might be able to win it back in the future. Suppressing his emotions, Chu Fuchin forced himself to calm down. His tone also became gentler. Ruler's words are wrong. If we can't come to an agreement, then we can still discuss. Why do we have to fight? However, just as he was halfway through, he heard Miao Di say expressionlessly, 5 breaths. His expression seemed calm and unperturbed, but a trace of killing intent had already condensed in his eyes. This was to remind Chu Fuchin that he still had 5 breaths of time before he could safely leave this place. Beside Zhongsho, Yixin suddenly opened his eyes. His hand on his sword, he took a step forward. Why does Junshang need to waste words with him? He waved his sleeves, and the green sword light came out of the sheath. In the beginning, it didn't show any signs of life. It only trembled slightly and didn't have the slightest trace of smoke or fire. It followed the spiritual flow of the boundary river and moved forward. However, before everyone could react, the sword light had already arrived in front of Chu Fuchen. Then, the sword intent suddenly increased in height, revealing a tyrannical aura. The intense ringing of the sword resounded in all directions, causing everyone's eardrums to hurt. Chu Fuchen's eyes were also aghast, and his expression changed again. However, he did not panic despite the haste of the situation. 4 jade talismans flew out from his sleeves and protected around his body. They turned into 4 god beasts, the shape of 4 elephants. His sleeves waved and covered the green sword light within. A series of flying finger images shot out from within. Chu Fuchen laughed coldly. Very good. I heard that your Xiaoyao Yixian's great domain shaking sword technique once broke the combined strength of 3 venerables in a day. It is not bad to be able to experience it today. Finger after finger flicked the sword body, giving out a series of clanging sounds. Bit by bit, it cut down its strength and hurt its spirituality. Looking on as the green sword light that had turned into a dragon was about to be suppressed. Yixian didn't care. Only when the sword shadow was totally covered by Chu Fuchen's sleeves did he form a sword seal with his right hand. Instantly, the sword intent changed once more. Chu Fuchen's wide sleeves suddenly swelled up. It was like there was a wild and untamed dragon within that was charging in all directions. Large beads of sweat appeared on Chu Fuchen's forehead as he tried his best to maintain it. In the end, there was a pong sound as his sleeves were scattered. That green sword light also charged up, proud and arrogant, bright and dazzling, looking down on the world. As the sword slashed down, the god-beast illusionary image formed by the 4 elephant spiritual talismans instantly cracked. The remaining strength of the sword headed straight for Chu Fuchen's neck and continued to charge up. Chu Fuchen's clothes were all smashed into pieces by the shaking sword energy. At this moment, he was in a bad state and didn't dare to block anymore. With a flash, he opened up a space for himself. Yixian didn't chase, retracting the sword attack. His words were like spring thunder, scram. The moment this word was said, the people here came to their senses. The dozens of Saint Stage wills that were still lingering here a moment ago had actually disappeared without a trace. After Chu Fuchen avoided Yi Xian's sword, he didn't stop and didn't say a single word. He directly turned into a green streak and rolled away. Those 70-odd warships also retreated swiftly, like they were afraid that they exceeded the time limit set by the Miao Di. Everyone was stunned. Then, their eyes focused on the 70-odd spaceships of the celestial order outside of the celestial world. The scale wasn't small, but at this moment, in the eyes of everyone, it was really small and lonely. Zhao Yinran took a look inside. What a waste. At this moment, these words were somewhat baffling. Zhongshu knew what she meant. Originally, Song Xingdao had a part to play in this battle. Before the battle with Judu Xianting, Zhongshu pretty much used the strength of the Deqian family. At this moment, when they attacked the celestial world, it was naturally the turn of the 3 sections. Zhongshu purposely left Song Xingdao and the Dao soldiers that Song Xingdao sent over in the Yuanren world. Firstly, without a Saint Realm expert to defend the back, Zhongshu wouldn't leave at ease. Secondly, he came to take care of them. The Buddhist faction Kinzo sect was really strong. Even if they offended these few powers, it wouldn't hurt them. However, the current Song Xingdao was different. It seemed like his intentions were seen through by Zhao Yinran. Tan Jing, who had been watching from the side since he returned, also sighed. He knew that the Celestial Order, which had tens of thousands of years of history, was totally finished. It took less than 10 minutes to crush the navy of the Celestial Order. Since Chu Fuchen and the Saint Realm experts and spaceships sent by the 4 powers were forced to flee, the people of the Celestial Order lost all their fighting spirit and didn't have any thoughts of resisting. The few Saint Realm experts didn't even attack. Shirulin had already brought 9 Tai God Lightning ships to take down most of the Celestial Order ships. A total of 16 bright broken starships fell into the hands of Shirulin. This was what made Zhongshu happy. Each Earth-grade warship was shockingly valuable. It was equivalent to a quarter of the income of the Yuanren world in Diqian. These 9 bright Broken Star ships were similar to the Tai God Lightning ships. They were warships that could have Source Ocean demon-slaying warriors in charge. It was enough to cause the strength of the Qian celestial dynasty to rise to another level. After crushing the navy, next was the landing of the army. Led by Lai Ke, just 3,000 Black Fox Iron Cavalry, 10,000 Big Dipper sword soldiers, 10,000 Big Dipper crossbow soldiers. They pretty much swept the entire Tianfeng world. Actually, at this moment, the troops of the Celestial Order here were more than 2 times that of Lai Ke's troops. However, on one side, their morale had collapsed and they had no fighting spirit. On one side, there were a few Saint Realm experts forcing them, so the upper echelons of the cultivation faction didn't have any thoughts of resisting. They were afraid that Zhong Shou, this tyrant who was still so overbearing even when facing the combined attacks of the 4 factions, would kill them all in rage. As such, the giant protective spiritual formation within the celestial world was totally useless. Before the war was even half over, close to half of the people had expressed their intentions to join Zhong Shou. Zhong Shou was too lazy to bother about them. What he cared about the most was the treasury of the Celestial Order. Maybe because he was too confident that the League of the Seven and the other 3 factions could protect the celestial world. The treasury of the Celestial Order actually didn't move at all. Looking at the tens of thousands of low-grade celestial stones within the treasury, Zhong Shou was shocked. Hundreds of thousands of armor pills. Zhong Shou was so happy that he was about to faint on the spot. Just these gains alone were enough for him to clear all his debts to the Shura race. It was more than enough to make up for the loss of turning back time. They could even double the number of Dao soldiers they had now. However, this happiness was only when he found the treasury of the Celestial Order. When he heard that the Celestial Order had already given out 1/3 of the treasury to the 4 factions to help, Zhong Shou instantly gritted his teeth, his face alternating between green and white. He really wanted to pluck off the heads of the 5 guild heads of the Celestial Order. At this moment, Lu Wubing didn't follow him over. After taking down the Celestial Order, he could only personally deal with the matters of the Celestial Order. Luckily, this was just a small world. Enemy and ally were clear, and it wasn't too complicated. The only thing was that it was a little problematic was to calm down the Shang family cultivators. Zhong Shou could only be patient and not kill them. He could only lock up the higher-ups of the Celestial Order. 3 days later, Zhong Shou brought Yi Xian and Osamu Hara into the Wenqi building. Who knows if it was because the Celestial Order had just gone through a war, or the owner of this place didn't know how to run things. Anyways, when Zhong Shou walked in, it was totally deserted and cold. Shen Yuexian seemed to know that he would come and sat in the shop to wait. That day, when I was crafting for Ruler, I didn't expect that Ruler was actually the Diqian country ruler of the Cloud World. I also didn't expect that in a few years Ruler would sweep an area and build up your current foundations. Even in this celestial world, it has also fallen into Ruler's hands. Sighing and exclaiming, Chun Yuexian used a joking tone. In the future, my Wenqi building will be under the Ruler's rule. Ruler, please take care of me on account of our old friendship. Looking at this person, Osamu Hara didn't believe him. He looked just SOSO, really normal. Could such a person repair the injuries of his jade puppet? A bright glow exploded out in Yi Xian's eyes. He focused on Shun Yueshuan's hands and knew that this person was not only a sword cultivator. His sword techniques were not normal, even not weaker than him. As an artifact blacksmith, to have such attainments in the martial path, how interesting. Chapter 1008. After greeting one another, they sat down and greeted one another. Yuan Wushang couldn't wait to take out the jade puppet. I heard Zhong Shou say that Landlord Shun's artifact crafting skills are extraordinary, something he has never seen before in his life. Who knows if it is true or not? I have a puppet here that is slightly damaged. Can Landlord help me repair it? His words were straightforward and did not hide his suspicion at all. After Shen Yuexian heard this, he wasn't annoyed, smiling and not saying a word. However, when he took a look at the puppet, he was stunned. A bright glow exploded in his eyes, and a melancholy expression appeared. Zhongsho looked on from the side, his lips curling up. He knew that this landlord Shun had a deep relationship with the Mahis faction. It is actually a Saint Realm puppet. My knowledge has increased once more. In this world, there's actually a mechanism secret technique that can go up against Saint Realm cultivators. Legend has it that the 12 coppermen of the Qin era in the Cloud World and the Mahis faction Jade puppets could be compared to Saint Realm cultivators. This legend is really true. Shun Yuexian only lost his composure for a moment before his expression returned to normal. Thank you, ruler, for your high hopes. Shin Yuexian might not be humble, but in terms of artifact crafting skills, no one in this celestial world can compare to me. In terms of the grand Tao of mechanisms, I have some attainments. However, in terms of repairing this ancient god artifact, I don't have the ability. The Mahist faction mechanism techniques were mostly lost. However, when Shin Yuexian said that, Yuan Wushuang's eyes were filled with disappointment. However, he himself didn't have much hope. Following which he heard Shin Yuexian's tone change as he smiled. Although I don't have the ability, there is nothing I can do. However, there is a reason why this Mahis faction Jade puppet was able to shock the universe and spread to the outer region. This Jade puppet actually has the ability to repair itself. The damage isn't large, only the outer layer is damaged, so it should be fine. Whilst he spoke, Shun Yuexian flicked his fingers. Powerful gusts of energy slammed into the Jade puppet. At first, Osamu Hara wanted to stop him, but there was nothing he could do. A moment later, an inexplicable look of surprise appeared on his face, and he no longer tried to stop them. He saw that the outer shell of the Jade puppet was flowing with spiritual light. About an hour later, the Jade shell was as smooth as a mirror again. More than half of the sword wounds had disappeared without a trace, and the remaining parts were gradually recovering. Unable to contain his joy, Osamu Hara's impression of this landlord Qin instantly rose by a large margin. Thinking of the people that Zhongsho knew, they were indeed capable. He also spoke from the bottom of his heart. I really have to thank the Tower Master this time. Otherwise, Osamu Hara, would really be unable to do anything. The only thing he didn't mention was the reward. With Zhongsho beside him, there was no need for him to ask. There's no need for that. I was just excited to see him. I acted without your permission. Please forgive me for being rash. Shun Yuexian shook his head. His tone was solemn. It is a rare blessing for fellow cultivator to be able to obtain this Jade puppet. There aren't many of these items in the world, probably only one of them. Please treasure it when you use it in the future. I understand. Osamu Hara nodded his head. This was something that he was using to save his life. So how could he not treasure it? If it wasn't for the fact that he owed Zhongsho a favor a few years ago, he wouldn't have been willing to go head-to-head with those two Saint Realm experts of the Taoist faction. Following which he had an idea, taking out a blueprint. He used his spiritual power to support it and passed it to Shun Yuexian. This item was obtained along with the Jade puppet. Who knows if it is the blueprint to create the puppet? Osamu Hara has nothing to thank you for. I only hope that this item can be of help to you. Shin Yuexian's expression was filled with shock as he received the blueprint. The moment it entered his hand, he felt that it wasn't ordinary. Zhongsho also took a look at the item, his eyes also rippling. That was dragon skin, the real deal. It was refined from the molted skin of at least 3 Saint Realm dragons. It wasn't as good as the Imperial Demon Slaying records, but it was still really extraordinary. However, he saw Shun Yuexian's hand tremble slightly. It was obvious that he was so emotional that he couldn't control himself. I can't thank you enough. This item is really important to me, even more important than my life. In the future, if Brother Yuan needs me for anything, just ask. Yixin won't reject it. Osamu Hara's brows rose when he heard this. He waved his sleeves and smiled. However, Zhongsho knew that this person's heart was probably blooming with joy. He also knew what this fellow was planning. He gave this blueprint to Shun Yuexian so that when the puppet was damaged in the future, he wouldn't be able to find a person to repair it. This item was useless in Osamu Hara's hands. Looking at Shin Yueshuan's actions, he obviously had some ability. At least during this month, those artifact blacksmiths under him, even those few God Realm experts who were said to be skilled in artifact crafting, didn't notice that this puppet had the ability to repair itself. Although he felt disdain in his heart, Zhongshou didn't expose him. After Shan Yuexian solemnly kept the blueprint, he opened his mouth. This time I came over because I have a few things to ask of you. Firstly, you have already dealt with this puppet. Secondly, can you help me strengthen these items? After he waved his hand, he heard a series of clanging sounds. First, it was 2 giant black shields, and then several women's weapons and armor. These were all crafted by Shan Xian using black Xian purple hero iron. After many years, the power of these treasures didn't decrease, but they slowly weren't what he needed anymore. That blue fire Xian turtle popped its head out from Zhongshou's sleeves and looked at Shan Yuexian eagerly. Zhongshou said generously, "You could just ask for any spiritual materials you need." They had just taken down the celestial world and hadn't squandered it, so they were still rich. Within the celestial world treasury, what kind of treasures didn't they have? Shen Yuexian didn't feel troubled at all. After thinking about it for a moment, he wrote a list for Zhongshou. "I will send these items over. 3 months later, ruler can come and collect them. I don't dare to guarantee anything else, but these 2 giant shields can definitely be upgraded to celestial treasures. There's also a high chance that they will become intermediate treasures." In the past, he had spent the most effort on these 2 shields, so naturally, he was the most confident. Zhongshou took a look at the list. His heart jumped. The items that Shan Yuexian listed weren't too precious, and the celestial world had everything one could think of. However, there were a lot of them, so one could see that after Shan Yuexian listened to his words, he was prepared to use them. The other items were okay, but these 2 shields were too huge. 2 celestial treasures could be compared to 20 normal celestial treasures. At this moment, he couldn't go back on his words and let others look down on him. He could only force a smile and keep the list into his sleeves. He thought to himself that this time the turtle was really lucky. The third thing is that I have an item that I am prepared to refine into a second soul. Normal blacksmiths can't handle it, so I can only find you to help me." As he said that, Zhongshou took out that 7-foot gung metal energy and floated in front of him. On the other side, Yixian also smiled and similarly took out a strand of gung metal spiritual energy. "On my side, I want to craft a celestial sword. Have you heard of the Great Domain Shaking Sword technique? It is best if it is an item that is compatible with my sword path. If I am able to craft it, Yixian will owe you a favor." He wasn't a Saint Realm venerable, but he was stronger than Saint Realm. A favor wasn't a small matter. It was also because he was looking forward to the sword that he would carry around with him in the future. Shen Yueshuan's eyes focused on those 2 threads of gung metal energy. His expression enlightened. Xiantian purple gung metal energy? What a good treasure. It is one of the best Xiantian gung energy to craft swords. It is tough to shape, but because of that, after the sword is formed, it is usually really firm and tough to break, and it is also really sharp. He looked towards Yi Xian with deep meaning. "I have heard of the name of Dao Xiaoyao. I have seen the Great Domain Shaking Sword technique not long ago. Within the shaking, there is huge strength, and it is really extraordinary. Brother Ye's sword path is really admirable. It isn't difficult for a sword to be compatible with your Great Domain Shaking Sword technique. However, these 2 threads of Xiantian purple gung metal energy are pretty much perfect. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be difficult to craft a god weapon. However, in Shin Yueshuan's hands, it is a waste. At most, it is a top-grade celestial sword. Is Brother Yi willing?" Zhongshou listened on from the side and was speechless. Top-grade celestial sword, which meant that it hadn't reached the peak level. It should be a little weaker than Tsang Shengdao's 7 swords. However, this was already really amazing. Yi Xian was also surprised, but he was much more shrewd than Osamu Hara. He didn't show any surprise. "It is okay. Yi Xian trusts you. God treasures were something that people yearned for. If a Saint Realm cultivator got one, they would have the ability to go up against an End Realm. However, Yixin knew that this was less than 1%. Moreover, it needed numerous heaven-grade supporting materials that were tough to find. Maybe only one or two would appear every thousands of years. Moreover, even if he could find all of them, where would he go to find a blacksmith who could craft god treasures? As for Shan Yuexian, this kind of brilliant weapon-refining grandmaster, it was already impossible to find him even if one were to carry a lantern. Naturally, one could imagine those above him. Moreover, he was pressed for time and didn't have so much time to wait. Grabbing what was right in front of him was the most important thing. Since that is the case, then I will take it. Shan Yuexian didn't stand on ceremony and reached out with his hand. He sucked Yi Xian's Xiantian purple gung metal energy over. 5 years to refine energy, 5 years to nurture the sword. Can Brother Yi come back 10 years later to take it? Crafting a top-grade celestial sword, but it wasn't a normal magical treasure. Zhongshou didn't find it weird. Celestial treasures were grade 9, and those 2 shields were at most grade 4. If this celestial sword was completed, it would be grade 9. They were both celestial treasures, but the gap was huge. The more exquisite it was, the stronger the strength of the sword. Yi Xian didn't hesitate at all, nodding his head slightly. Okay, I will leave this sword to you. The moment he said that, Zhongshou felt that Yi Xian's brows seemed to release some of the bad luck, and he suddenly brightened up. He instantly understood that 10 years later would be the time when Yi Xian stepped into the Saint Realm. At this moment, Shan Yuexian's gaze looked towards him. Ruler seems to be walking the path of a sword cultivator, the illusionary spirit, crafting sword technique. You want to merge this Xiantian purple gung metal energy into your second soul. You shouldn't have come to find me. Is that so? Could it be that Monarch is trying to suppress the corruption of the energy of the King Dao? Chapter 1009. Ruler seems to be walking the path of a sword cultivator, using the illusionary spirit forging sword technique. You want to merge this Xiantian purple mysterious gold energy into your second soul. So you shouldn't have come to find me. That's right. Is Ruler trying to suppress the corruption of the King Path energy? For a ruler like Zhongshou, this was what he cared about the most. Although the dead Qian celestial dynasty also walked the path of breaking ties with the mortal world, it was unavoidable for King Path energy to gather. If not, the sky-burning Saint dynasty wouldn't have been split into 8 countries, each ruling close to 100 worlds. Shan Yuexian had always found it weird. As the ruler of a country, Zhongshou didn't have many traces of King Path energy. However, there weren't too many traces of him being dragged down by the thoughts of the people of the world. His lifespan wasn't affected at all, and his path towards the Tao wasn't cut off. If he placed all his King Path martial arts on his second soul, then it wouldn't be weird. Apart from that, there should be other treasures suppressing it. I do have such intentions. Zhongshou smiled and didn't try to hide anything at all. He had a higher opinion of Shan Yuexian. From just a few words, he was able to see his foundations. He was an intelligent cultivator. Zhongshou is helpless. Is this method possible? He was asking Shan Yuexian whether or not he could do it. To suppress and cleanse the King Path energy that was gathered by the heart wasn't something that normal blacksmiths could do. A person's heart had good thoughts and evil thoughts. It was the purest thing and also the dirtiest thing. Without such research, one wouldn't know how to do it. The latter thought about it and took in a deep breath. In the past, the Qin Emperor also asked the Mahis for help. The Mahis also had people who studied it and learned a lot. Then, the Mahis were wiped out, but their legacy was still there. I was lucky and obtained some talismans. I can help Ruler a little, but as for how much, I don't know. I can only try my best. He looked at Zhongshou's Xiantian purple mysterious gold energy. 3 months later, Ruler can come and get the sword fetus. If nothing unexpected happens, this Shun can give Monarch a pleasant surprise. It was just a sword embryo. Naturally, it wouldn't take 10 years like Yi Xian's sword. Zhongshou still felt a little regretful. It seemed like this sword wouldn't make it in time for the Cloud World War. He was looking forward to Shun Yueshuan's surprise. He already knew that there was a 90% chance that this person was one of the successors of Ma's Gate. Perhaps Shan Yuexian also knew that he could not hide it from him, so his words were no longer as secretive as before. Ma's faction and the factions of the cloud world weren't enemies. However, the artifact technique inheritance that he grasped had always been coveted by the various sections. Even the foreign forces were drooling at the mouth. This person's identity was even more sensitive than Zhong Shou's. As long as he knew what was going on, there was no need to expose him. Then, "Thank you, Towerhead." Zhong Shou paused, his face solemn as he said sincerely, "The fourth thing is that I would like to ask Brother Shun to be the Minister of Finance of the Deqian Celestial Dynasty. You will be a grade 2 official and be a duke. If you aren't willing, then you could be worshipped by my Celestial Dynasty." Yi Xian and Osamu Hara both lowered their eyebrows and weren't surprised at all. It would be weird if Zhong Shou didn't want to recruit such an artifact master. Shin Yueshuan's lips curled up slightly. He had some guesses about why Zhong Shou came to visit. He could also sense Zhong Shou's sincerity. When Deqian moved into the celestial world, he had asked around. In the center was the cabinet, meeting hall, privy court, and 5 army inspectors split into the 3 ministers. Below the cabinet were the 6 ministries, together with the Minister of Finance, and Grand Secretary. They were known as the 9 ministers. The Minister of Finance was one of the 9 ministers and was also known as the General of Craftsmen. He had a high position and was in charge of all the craftsmen in the country. Zhong Shou's personal spiritual item and spiritual herb production areas, as well as artifact refining and pill refining, were all under his control. His position wasn't high in those commoner dynasties, but in the Celestial Dynasty, his position was only lower than the Minister of Personnel. After struggling for a while, Shin Yuexian took in a deep breath. Does ruler know about Ma's sect's teachings? When Zhong Shou heard that, he laughed out loud. He knew that Shan Yuexian was tempted. He was testing whether or not Zhong Shou could allow Ma's sect to exist and even spread their teachings under his rule. Love and not attack. Not only kin, not only son, but also son. If the world loves one another, then it will be governed. If one is against one another, then it will be chaotic. So love and not attack. If one is big, one won't attack the small. If one is strong, one won't bully the weak. If one is strong, one won't bully the weak. If one is strong, one won't bully the weak. This is why in the world, the commoner countries shouldn't use fire, water, poison, or weapons to harm one another. These words sound nice, but I don't agree. Ma's sect felt that the chaos in the world started because people didn't love one another. Ministers and sons were unfilial, rulers and fathers weren't kind, as well as doctors causing chaos in the family, dukes attacking the country. Even thieves hurting people were the result of people not loving one another. If people in the world could love one another and love one another as much as they love themselves, then the world would be peaceful. However, in Zhong Shou's eyes, that wasn't realistic. Those few saints of the ancient times, end-realm experts, all had their own ideals. What they wanted to do was a little idealistic. In his eyes, Mozi and Shizi's ideals weren't feasible at all. When he said that, he saw that Shun Yueshuan's expression had changed. Zhong Shou didn't stop and said openly, Zhong Shou believes that humans are evil. Each person is an individual and has their own thoughts and needs. They also need to struggle for their own survival. However, there are limited things in the world. If one lives, one will take over other people's chances. People are like that. Countries are like that. Zhong Shou doesn't believe that everyone can love one another to such an extent. Even if they can, I believe that it will be the time when the human race is destroyed. The people of the world need to compete and have the heart to improve themselves. Only then can they continue on their journey. This was Zhong Shou's own Tao, his own thoughts, and there was nothing to hide. There was also no need to purposely suck up to him. Speaking of not attacking, before the Qin dynasty, countries attacked one another for thousands of years. After the Qin dynasty, the cloud world was unified and there weren't many wars for thousands of years. As he said that, Zhongsho saw that Shun Yueshuan's expression had dimmed. Laughing, Zhongsho's tone changed once more. However, Zhongsho has always thought that the more one argues, the clearer it gets. When the 100 schools of thought fought, that was when the cloud world was truly prosperous. Any single person should have the right to speak and think freely. You can't force my people to think what I think just because of what I think. What he meant was that it didn't matter what he thought, and he wouldn't interfere with them. He always felt that the Hanwu dynasty banning the 100 schools of thought and only respecting Confucianism was the stupidest move. It was only beneficial for a moment, but calamity for 1,000 years. This matter also had something to do with Song Xingdao. If it wasn't for the Taoist faction backing out of politics as the price to work with the Confucian faction to kill Shi Zi, the Taoist faction wouldn't have dared to do such a thing. The Confucian sect did not have the guts to urge the imperial emperor to only respect Confucianism. Shen Yueshuan's eyes slowly lit up as he looked at Zhongsho in a daze. After a long while, he sighed and bowed towards Zhongsho. If ruler was born in the ancient times, you would definitely be one of the saint emperors. Since ruler is so magnanimous, how can I not agree? Although the Mahis faction was wiped out, many of them escaped to the outer region. This subject will do everything in my power to summon my fellow disciples back to serve monarch. To prevent others from eyeing the legacy, the Mahis faction disciples were scattered all over the place. At this moment, the Qian was brimming with life and limitless potential. It was worth it for the Mahis faction to take a gamble on this person. Zhongsho heaved a sigh of relief, feeling delighted in his heart. He thought to himself that the Mahis faction legacy hadn't been wiped out. Listening to what this person said, after 10,000 years of cultivation, this faction that was said to have been wiped out had some foundations. To be able to persuade this person to serve him was his fortune. In the next moment, Samuraim's eyes were filled with a burning desire. What about Earth-grade warships like the 9 Bright Broken Star warships and the Tai God Lightning warships? Can Brother Shen craft them? Although they could buy Earth-grade warships, in the long run, the Qian still needed a portion of the ability to craft them. Only then would they not be easily controlled by others. Tai God Lightning? 9 Bright Broken Star? Shen Yueshuan's eyes flashed, filled with disdain. These 2 warships are not bad. They are famous in the various worlds. However, I personally feel that the 9 Capital Celestial Court's Cold Crystal Shadow Blade ships are the best. Any Dao soldier could be used, which also meant that they were average. If they were captured, it would not be good. Only when they were tailor-made and done to the extreme would they be the top Earth-grade warships. Shen Yueshuan was a decisive person. After accepting the Imperial Household Head's request, he hastily ended Wunshi Building's business. Then, he boarded a spaceship and disappeared. Zhongsho knew that this person most probably went to recruit companions, so naturally, he was happy to see that happen. He wanted to send a few God Realm cultivators to protect him, but Shen Yueshuan rejected him. He roughly guessed that this person's strength was not weaker than Yi Xian, so Zhongsho didn't force him. He only handed the Imperial Demon slaying records to Yi Xian for safekeeping. He would pass it to Shen Yueshuan when he returned. Since this person had the confidence to tailor-make Earth-grade warships for his Source Ocean demon-slaying warriors, Zhongsho naturally supported him. He himself was already prepared to leave the celestial world. That day, Shirulin commanded the 9 Tai God Lightning warships, the 14 9 Bright Broken Star warships, along with tens of thousands of Dao soldiers that were hastily organized and not fully recruited. They pressed towards the direction of the cloud world and acted like they were invading. Naturally, they couldn't truly attack over. At this moment, the Qian didn't have such strength. Just those few World Protector Venerables alone were enough to make them really wary. Their actions were just to threaten. Even if they could only restrict 10% or 20% of their strength, it was still not bad. As for the Taoist and Buddhist faction Saint Realm cultivators, they each left one person in the celestial world. Along with Yi Xian, they maintained the peace of this place. The other 2 rushed over to Yuanren. However, for some reason, The Miao Di and Lanka Bodhisattva's gazes towards him were a little weird. It shocked Zhongshou. Was the matter of him being the unlimited beginning and end Buddha exposed? However, he couldn't care so much. Since the two of them didn't say anything, then he could only act like he didn't know. Along with the Miao Di and Sikong Fo, the Gantian giant ship also returned. They spread the news to make it seem like Zhongshou had already returned to Yuanren. He himself, along with Ao Kun and Ao E, silently left and headed towards the cloud world. Chapter 10:10. With Saint Realm venerables like Ao Kun and Ao E driving the royal demon god shuttle, Zhongshou only took a few days to get to the cloud world. If Saint Realm venerables were willing, they didn't care about the consumption of energy. In a day, they could pass through hundreds and thousands of worlds. Even Zhongshou's flying speed was extraordinary. Even if he didn't use the royal demon god shuttle, he could cross dozens of worlds in a day. His cultivation just needed to cross one more step, and he wouldn't need to rely on the world river to cross the world barrier. Outside of the cloud world, what Zhongshou sensed right away was a dragon roar from Gantian Mountain. Oh, is it the Saint Een Dragon of Gantian Mountain, the country protecting Saint Beast? Like it was welcoming his return, the dragon roar shook the world. It was really majestic. Zhongshou had a weird expression in his eyes. This dragon aura was pressing down on him. It obviously had strength that could compare to Saint Realm venerables. Thinking about it, it wasn't surprising. Based on what Kong Rue said, this Een Dragon was born from the fate of the Deqian country. When the Deqian was strong, it would nourish its energy. When the Deqian was weak, it would corrupt its soul. At this moment, his Deqian celestial dynasty had 77 worlds, expanding by dozens of times. It wasn't surprising that the Een Dragon's strength increased greatly. Especially with the celestial world as a relay point, Gantian Mountain's strength had already started to merge into one. Although Zhongshou himself couldn't sense much of the vast dragon aura. However, looking at how Ao Kun and Ao E both treated it seriously, one could see that this Een Dragon wasn't weak even among Saint Realm venerables. Outside of his calculations, there was still Saint Realm help. What a surprise. The second one he sensed was the Avicii throne. Since the artifact spirits sensed Zhongshou's return, it was really excited. At that moment, Zhongshou connected with the energy meridian passage from the Avicii throne. Then, a wave of incomparably powerful and majestic energy immediately blended into his body. At this moment, he felt as if he was omnipotent. He had the strength to pull up mountains and rivers, and his aura was unrivaled. This illusion only lasted for a moment. Zhongshou's face turned pale again. It was the aura of a ruler, but the quantity was simply too great. The surroundings of the Yuanren world were all newly occupied lands. He had already divided the various countries, and he had yet to truly set them as the capital. The people's hearts were not united, and the effects were not obvious. However, in the cloud world, the King Dao energy was like a flood that continuously swept into his soul. This was especially true for the second primordial spirit, even though it had the Avicii throne as a medium. Within his soul, there was the illusionary heart mirror and the 9-layer golden pagoda suppressing him. The one origin soul sword also started to change on its own. The sword was golden in color, noble and threatening. The words Heavenly Emperor faintly appeared on the sword. It took Zhongshou almost 15 minutes to forcefully use the Emperor Wind technique to suppress the King Dao energy that was constantly surging over. He didn't let it continue to spread and reach the true source of his soul. It seems like after this matter, the most important thing isn't the Liu family sky-burning saint dynasty, but to find a treasure that can suppress king energy. He instinctively thought back to Tianjing. After the Tianfang world battle, Zhongshou tossed this person to the Buddhist and sword sects. Who knew what was going on now? Yuanren upgrading to a large world was beneficial to the few of them. Zhongshou had other matters to attend to. As for the Buddhist and Kinzo sect experts, they had nothing to do anyway. Zhongsho felt like he should leave the upgrading of Yuanren world to these two sections. However, at this moment, he felt that this matter wasn't appropriate. He felt that if Yuanren world really upgraded, the Qingdao energy that was gathered would have a change in quality. Although it wouldn't affect the source, it would affect his Dao path. I am pretty much tying myself in a trap of my own making. This is really problematic. An incomparable sense of urgency arose spontaneously in his heart. Treasures were tough to find, and one could only hope for them. He first needed to move the capital, move the Avicii throne away, and suppress it in Yuanren world. He also needed to open up the dozens of worlds that he controlled, such that the areas of influence would be connected and there would be no more obstructions. At that time, the Avicii throne would be able to organize the Qingdao energy within the celestial dynasty. Zhongsho's heart was filled with many thoughts, until Ao Kuan and Ao E said goodbye to him. Within the cloud world, numerous saint venerables have gathered. They can see through the changes in the world. It isn't convenient for me to get close. The battle hasn't started, so I can hide outside. You need to hide your identity and return to the common people's vast habitat as Tanxiao. It is best if you don't return to Gantian Mountain. Before Ao Kuan left, he casually reminded Zhongsho. Then, a weird glow appeared in his eyes. I heard that the location of the Book of Universe is still uncertain. There's still many Saint Realm experts fighting for it outside. And I want to join in. Who knows, we might be able to take a look at it. Apart from recording space techniques, it was said that it also contained the creation Tao. Zhongshoxin's eyes were like a clear mirror. He knew about the Book of Universe. No matter if it was true or not, whether or not it was a smokescreen that Wei Su released. Ao Kuan wouldn't let it go so easily and would definitely get to the bottom of it. That was because his existence and destruction technique had to be completed with the creation Tao. He drove the royal demon god shuttle alone and continued forwards. Zhongsho started to try to control the Qingdao energy that surged over. If I go all out, it should be comparable to half a step to Saint Realm. This is just the desolate savage land in the southeast of the Cloud World. My country's strength in the Yuanren world can only be used by 10% here. A top large-sized world isn't something a normal small-sized world can compare to. However, Zhongsho's aura suddenly changed. He stopped using the Emperor Wind technique, and the surging aura was retracted. He wanted people to be unable to see the truth and not know that he was using King Path martial arts. Then, he could only use less than 70% of his cultivation and barely maintain it at God Realm peak. If he wanted to improve further and temporarily have Saint Realm combat strength, he would have to use secret techniques, just as he had predicted. The closer he got to the Cloud World, the more Zhongsho missed Xianyuan Irin and Kong Yao. However, he knew that Ao Kuan's words were priceless. However, even though he couldn't return to the Cloud World, the people of the Cloud World could come and see him. Xianyuan Irin and Kong Yao's identities were too sensitive, and each of their actions attracted attention. Generals like Renbo, Zhang Huai, Zhong Yuan, and Ren Tianxing were in similar situations, which was why a day later, Zhongsho met Zhong Yuan in the World River 5 worlds away from the Cloud World. Only this fellow didn't attract much attention. In just a few short years, this fellow actually stepped into the spirit realm. This is all thanks to the ruler's instant space Dragon Hall. I have benefited a lot. Not only me, but the old people of Gantian Mountain have also improved. However, only I, Hu Zhongyan, was the first to enter the spirit realm. Hu Zhongyan giggled as he explained, filled with glee. After stepping through the spirit realm tribulation, one could be considered a celestial. Their lifespan would be extended to 3,000 years. No wonder he was so gleeful. However, he still remembered the important matter and said solemnly, "This time there seems to be a huge storm. Song Xingdao's 3 sects and 6 schools have called back their disciples from all over the Cloud World to defend their mountain gates. 3 days ago, someone saw the Confucian Temple in the imperial capital. It was shining brightly for half a day. It was said that there were End Realm Saint Venerables returning to the Cloud World. There are 7 of them who have confirmed the news. Songqingdao Xiuguan, Yuanjing, Taoist factions Qing Xian, Taiwan Taoist Lord, and Confucian factions Zhu Zi have also returned. Demon factions World Stepping Demon Lord and Wushang Yuan Demon all had their avatars appear in the world. As for the others, they aren't things that De Qian, can find out. There's also news that the 3 heavenly grotto heavens have opened. As Hu Zhongyuan said this, his face was really ugly. This was the first time he had faced such a dangerous situation. 7 End Realm experts gathered in the Cloud World. This was something that only happened during the Cloud Desolate era. Any one of them had the ability to flip the world and even sink the Cloud Continent. Once the battle started, even if they were swept by the edges of the storm, normal cultivators wouldn't be able to handle it. In the past, they missed the ancient era when spiritual energy was at its peak. Now that the spiritual energy wave had truly arrived, it made them wary and nervous. The current Cloud World situation is on the verge of exploding. Qiu Shumi and Kong Shui are worried about the situation and have stopped sending troops to the southeast. However, they have sent more troops to the border to face off against the Taishang to restrict them. Speaking of this era, Hu Zhongyuan shook his head and smiled bitterly. Let's hope that we can help Song Qingdao. However, at most, we can only restrict a portion of the Deqian army. Zhongshu squinted and listened quietly to Hu Zhongyuan speak. He had a rough idea of the current situation in the Cloud World. World Stepping Demon Lord, Wushang Yuan Demon? These 2 End Realm Saint Venerables of the Demon Path didn't come from the Cloud World. They came from the outer region during the Cloud Desolate era. The 2 of them weren't like those alien races who snatched the resources of the Cloud World. Instead, they spread their teachings. They chose natives of the Cloud World to become disciples. This was why during the later stages of the Cloud Desolate era, after the alien races were all chased out, the demon path that they passed down managed to survive. They also caused huge problems and nearly opened the connection between the Cloud World and the Chaos World several times. Even now, there were remnants of the Chaos Gate beneath the 5 cloud continents and the Cloud Ocean. Demonic energy infected and caused many beasts to be corroded and become even more vicious. At this moment, the 2 demon ancestors definitely didn't descend to help Song Qingdao. There was also Zhu Zi, the End Realm Saint Venerable of the Confucian faction. Even now, there were 2 more Saint Venerables. Since Zhu Zi had returned, then that person had to have arrived too. Thinking about this, Zhongshu felt his body turn cold, and he broke out in a cold sweat. Apart from that, who knew how many Saint Venerables were eyeing Song Qingdao? Zhang Huai said that this is an open scheme, using strength to suppress and cause the hearts of the people in the common people's path to scatter. It is such that the Taoist faction, Confucian faction, and Demon faction can attack from within. It is also such that Song Qingdao has to go all out. It is the same as how you forced the Celestial Order a few days ago. I heard that at this moment, many of Song Qingdao's spiritual veins have fallen into the hands of the Taoist and Demon faction. Many aristocratic families have called back their disciples from Song Qingdao. All right, Hu Zhongyuan suddenly thought about something and took out a jade talisman. Chapter 10:11. This is our De Qian's income list these few years, as well as all the spiritual materials and treasuries we have accumulated. Zhongshu casually took it from Hu Zhongyuan's hands. He knew that Rinbua and Zhang Huai most probably asked Hu Zhongyuan to bring it over. He swept it with his spiritual sense and started to read. However, in his heart, he didn't care much. Zhongshu hadn't bothered about the Cloud World De Qian matters for many years. How was the income, mind stone veins, artifact, crafting materials, and spiritual herbs? How much did the army expand? He had no idea at all. He only knew that it seemed to be growing really quickly. After the Blood Cloud cavalry dug out the Blood Hero God iron mines, it had expanded to a huge 20,000. There were also 27,000 sets of Blood Cloud cavalry armor that were still in the treasury, without an owner. The simplified Big Dipper sword soldiers and Big Dipper crossbow soldiers had increased to 360,000. The increase in Xiantian experts meant that Huang Grey Dao soldiers were being built. Based on what Xiu wanted, they were prepared to build 60,000 at once. At this moment, there were 90 Spirit Realm cultivators and 14 Celestial Realm cultivators. Who knows how the Deqian could afford to raise them? They invested such a huge amount in the army, and the meeting hall didn't object? Zhongshu shook his head. However, when the information in the talisman was reflected in his mind, he was shocked. Low-grade celestial stones, 7,900 a year. Is that true or false? Celestial stones had to be refined from normal mind stones by Spirit Realm and above cultivators. Behind one celestial stone, there were often millions of mind stones used up. 7,900 low-grade celestial stones. Even the 3 medium-sized worlds under his rule added together weren't that much. Hu Zhongyuan looked at Zhongshu in confusion. Every month, the Deqian would send out a message talisman to the Yuanren realm. However, he didn't think too deeply about it, and said excitedly, "It is because of the spiritual wave. In these 4 years, in just 2 cloud continents, we have discovered 44 large and medium-sized mines. Now we lack manpower to mine. These 7,900 mortal stones were all surplus. There would be wear and tear if the spirit stones were preserved. Therefore, the several state ministers came to an agreement to ask the country's consecrators to refine nearly half of the excess spirit stones into immortal stones. According to what Zhang Huai said, next year's income should be doubled." Zhongshu's jaw dropped. He could not close his mouth. In other words, just the income from the cloud world was equivalent to 90% of Deqian's land outside the cloud world. Instantly, he felt a little dispirited. So, all the territories that he had fought so hard in the outer region to occupy weren't even as much as the cloud world. Kong Yao, Zhang Huai, and the others resisted the suppression of the various sects and factions to forcefully take down the South Wind Cloud continent. They also expanded tens of thousands of miles south of the Central Cloud continent. It caused the Deqian's land to nearly double. It seemed like their achievements weren't weaker than his. As expected from the top large worlds, known as the Celestial World. The only weird thing was that based on the memories of his last life, the cloud world's spiritual energy and mind stone production shouldn't have increased so explosively. Could it be that it was also because of him? The spiritual wave was brought forward by decades and started to enter its peak. As a butterfly, he had only flapped his wings a few times in an attempt to change his fate. However, he had caused a huge storm. With the increase in mind stones, the other artifact crafting materials and spiritual herbs were also explosively increasing. However, due to the short time, many of the heavenly treasures weren't fully grown due to the lack of years. However, from a number of terms listed in the Jade Talisman, it still shocked Zhongshu. Compared to the Cloud World, the current Celestial World wasn't even trash. No wonder so many Xeno-race experts from the ancient times coveted this place. There was a lot of information in the talisman, but with Zhongshu's cultivation, his spiritual sense swept for a moment before he finished reading it all. At this moment, he couldn't help but mock himself. As the ruler of a country, he was really a weirdo. Before I came, the country guarding Duke instructed me to pass this to you. The Duke's intention was to expand the army by another 500,000 soldiers next year, increase the number of Blood Cloud cavalry to 5,000, and build another 15,000 Black Fox Iron Cavalry. Hu Zhongyuan said, while carefully looking at Zhongshu's expression, seeing that the cloud world is about to be in chaos. If our Deqian doesn't increase our military strength, we won't be able to protect our land. At this moment, our Deqian can totally take the responsibility. However, this proposal was stopped by the meeting hall and couldn't be passed. Although Prime Minister Ren agreed, he couldn't convince the few of them and could only shelve it. 15,000 Black Fox Iron Cavalry? 100,000 Huang Grey Dao soldiers? Zhongshu took in a deep cold breath. This Qiu Wei was really generous. However, thinking about it, If the next year, the production of Mind Stones could double once more, they could really afford it. At that time, just the Cloud World alone, there would be 160,000 Big Dipper sword soldiers and Big Dipper crossbow soldiers, 50,000 Xian Grey Dao soldiers. This strength wasn't weak. That year when the Xiong King swept the world with 200,000 troops, he wasn't as strong. With such a strong army, it would be easy to crush the Taishan. However, the moment such a thought rose up, Zhong Shou shook his head. The land under his rule was the land under the Taishan was 10 times that of the Deqian. The dividends brought by the spiritual wave would only be more than that of the Deqian. The number of Dao soldiers they would increase would only be more. When he built the Deqian celestial dynasty, he thought that he had the ability to go up against the Taishan. Who knew that in just a few years, the strength of the Taishan would increase by at least 10 times? He was filled with emotions towards Qiu Wei's army expansion proposal. Zhong Shou didn't even think about it before he agreed. He was really clear that the current cloud world was just half a step away from chaos. It was just a fuse. For Qiu Wei to have such foresight and plan ahead made him happy. There was nothing he could do about it. The army expansion proposal is feasible. However, we still need to discuss the details. After Zhong Shou said this, he tossed a jade to Hu Zhong. Take this and Meteorin. She will arrange it. Hu Zhongyuan's face was instantly filled with uncontrollable surprise. He knew that this matter had already been settled. Zhong Shou could appoint a third of the people in the meeting hall. Qiu Wei told him to Zhong Shou because of this. After Zhong Shou left, one of the people who directly controlled the meeting hall was Xianyuan Irin, who was obsessed with pill refining and didn't bother about politics. With the support of this portion of the meeting hall, this army expansion proposal wouldn't be obstructed. He asked about the situation within the cloud world in detail and knew that apart from the central continent and the newly occupied land in the south where there were still rebellions, there were basically no wars in Deqian. Even the Southwind Cloud continent had slowly calmed down due to the Deqian government being clean and the tax being lax. They were temporarily free of worries. Zhong Shou tossed Hu Zhongyuan at the World River and drove the royal demon god shuttle away alone. As he flew, he secretly exclaimed in admiration. Father really didn't misjudge Zhongyuan, while everyone else was taking huge steps into the spirit realm. Only Zhongyuan was able to keep his temper and was stuck before the spirit realm, allowing others to catch up and surpass him. He chased up step by step on the spiritual cultivation path, reaching grade 9 in a few years. Then, in a battle, he grasped the spirit and martial arts merger path and used that to break through to the spirit realm. Although he was a few years later than others, his potential was limitless. At this moment, due to his accumulation, he was improving by leaps and bounds. Compared to him, although the others improved quickly, they lost some of their brilliance. The royal demon god shuttle had already become Zhong Shou's symbol. After entering the cloud world, Zhong Shou didn't use it anymore. He drove the sword and changed into Tan Qiu's appearance. The camouflage magic treasure that way Su gave him back then was naturally outdated now. However, the current Zhong Shou was an illusionary technique expert. He had the Sky Fox ability, Blood Eye illusionary technique, and also the illusionary heart mirror. After changing his appearance, he was an End Realm Saint Venerable. If one didn't pay attention, one might not be able to see through it. At this moment, the moment he got close to the cloud world, he could sense dozens of spiritual senses sweeping over. After confirming his identity, a portion of them retracted while a portion continued to wrap around him. Most of them had cold and evil intents. Zhong Shou could feel the pity and mocking intent of the owners of these spiritual senses. Zhong Shou didn't bother about them, flying towards Cang Xingdao. Since Senior Master Yuan Jing and Senior Master Fan Meng have returned to the cloud world, then that brat should be back too, right? Not seeing her for a few years, I really miss her. The person he was thinking about was Chu Shui. Without this brat by his side to play around with, he felt like he had lost a huge joy in life. When he reached the outer area of the common people's vast habitat, he could feel the tense atmosphere. All the formations and restrictions were opened up, and there were many pairs of cultivators patrolling outside. Even Zhong Shou was blocked outside of the formation. Luckily, there were many people who recognized the common people's palace first seat. After confirming that he was an imposter, they let him pass. When Zhong Shou was about to step into the common people's vast habitat, he saw that a few people were already waiting outside. Two of them were Zhao Yanran and Xian Yunlan, who had returned earlier than him. As for the other three, one was Han Fong, who was brimming with life. His white hair had turned black. He had passed his tribulation and was already a Saint Rel person. The one in the middle was the current head of Tsang Xingdao, the revered One Wei Su. In the end, he thought that it was Mingyu, whom he had met once. 3 Saint Realm experts waiting here, the revered one personally waiting. This was already the highest level of respect. Junior brother, you really shouldn't have returned this time. When Zhong Shou arrived, Wei Su turned around and walked alongside him. His expression was filled with unhappiness. Your intentions are good, and I am really grateful. However, there is really no need for this. Yuanren world is the only way out for Tsang Xingdao. We need you to take care of it in the future, and we can't make any mistakes. Why do we need to be swept into this storm at such a time? When Zhong Shou heard this, his brows instantly furrowed. Was this Wei Su so disheartened and lazy to such an extent? With such a situation, how could he even talk about passing his tribulation? Pouting in his heart, Zhong Shou's tone instantly became cold. Then this time, senior brother Wei has no confidence at all. You don't even have the courage to fight to the death? Are you in total despair? Wei Su was startled when he heard that, looking closely at Zhong Shou. Chapter 10:12. Then this time, senior brother Wei doesn't have any confidence at all? You don't even have the courage to fight to the death? Are you in total despair? Wei Su was startled when he heard that, looking closely at Zhong Shou. Junior brother, are you angry? He could see the rage hidden under Zhong Shou's expressionless face. It was obvious that he was sad about his misfortune and angry that he didn't fight. Wei Su couldn't help but laugh. How can I really feel despair? If I really didn't have any chance, I wouldn't have followed Xiuguan back and dragged down the entire sect to take this gamble. As Wei Su said this, his eyes slowly gave off a fierce aura. This time I was too anxious and was plotted against by others. To hunt wild geese all day long, but to be pecked blind by them. However, Qing Xin wants to wipe out my Tsang Xingdao so easily. At least 2 to 3 end realms will die here. Hey, that year master said something well. If the heavens can't tolerate me, then why not break the heavens? At most, we will suffer heavy losses. Samuraim's light dimmed. Although Wei Su's words were really overbearing and firm. However, he didn't mention anything about the tribulation. He only said that this battle would cause the Taoist faction and the other factions to suffer heavy losses. Mingyu opened her mouth and smiled. We will do our best and leave the rest to the heavens. I, Tsang Xingdao, don't have such a saying. Even if we are in despair, we will use the sword in our hand to open a path. During these 10,000 years, we have walked just like that. Junior brother, you don't have to worry. Moreover, what is the point of worrying now? If we can win this battle, we will live. If we can't, then we will just die. She was really open-minded, and her expression was much more cheerful than before. It was less cold and magnanimous, like she didn't care about life and death. Zhong Shou felt his heart sink. These two people might not be aware of it, but he could clearly guess the change in their mentality. If the leader of Tsang Xingdao was like this, then what about the others? With such a mentality, how could he not be defeated? Zhong Shou opened his mouth, wanting to say something to remind the two of them. But after a moment, he shut his mouth and remained silent. Before finding a way to win, it was useless to say anything. At this moment, he still didn't know about the situation within the vast habitat. As for the specific arrangements of the other 3 factions, he also didn't have the right to say such things. Wei Su only thought that Zhong Shou was still worried about the sect and felt gratified. When Tsang Xingdao accepted Zhong Shou as his disciple, he had never announced his identity. nor had he forced him to accept him. For the past few years, he had only silently supported her and maintained an awkward relationship. It seemed that it was effective after all. It made Zhongsho more and more concerned about his sect. He didn't judge wrongly that year. This kid really cared about relationships. Thinking about it, it is okay if you come back. With your identity as the top heir of the sky-burning Liu family, even the Taoist faction wouldn't dare to touch you. When you are in danger, I naturally have a way to send you away. Wei Su said with a relaxed tone, and then smiled. At this moment, the vast habitat does lack people. I heard that a few months ago, you forced back 3 formless god demons in Yuanren world. You must be at the Sword Intense Spirit Realm, right? Coincidentally, the vast habitat has a sword formation that no one is in charge of. Outside the vast habitat, it was heavily guarded. Within the vast habitat, the atmosphere was really solemn. Zhongsho looked around, only to see that this place wasn't as peaceful as it was in the past. It was a solemn scene. All the empty space outside of the palace was occupied by people. They were either practicing their spiritual techniques or practicing their martial arts. There were also groups of Tsang Shangdao disciples who were practicing different types of formations. They were all restrained, but they still caused waves of energy. Waves of spiritual waves swept through the air. Zhongsho couldn't help but stop and look carefully. Looking at the numbers, just Xiantian experts alone, there were at least 100,000. It seemed like the ones who benefited from the spiritual wave weren't only the Deqian and Taishang. Tsang Shengdao, 3 sects and 6 schools, 273,000 Xiantian and above disciples are all here. Wei Su's eyes shone. A pained expression flashed across his face. Then, it returned back to normal. Let's go. There is nothing much to see. Xiaoguan and Senior Master Yuanjing have been waiting for you in the main hall. Zhongsho nodded slightly and continued forwards. There was indeed nothing to see. After all, these disciples weren't Dao soldiers. Even if they formed the formation, power sect was limited. Song Xingdao had been on the decline for a period of time, and there weren't many talented junior disciples. Their true trump card definitely wasn't here. When he was in the outer region, Zhongsho saw several formations formed by Tsang Shangdao Earth-grade Dao soldiers. There were around 100 of them. Their profoundness was indiscernible and had many changes. After entering the palace gates, he arrived in the palace city. Zhongsho was stunned and stopped in his tracks once more. He saw that within the palace, there were hundreds of disciples using mind stones and spirit beast blood to form formations. They were independent outside of the common people's path vast habitats protection formation and also helped out the vast habitats protection formation. And at the center of it all, there were 7 sword artifacts floating high in the air, giving off a dense spiritual light. The energy rainbow spread dozens of miles and covered the entire common people's path vast habitat. They were actually celestial swords, the top celestial greatsword artifacts. The purple-gold flying sword at the center looked familiar to Zhongsho. It is the god-refined sword. At first glance, Zhongsho thought that it was the one in the ancestral hall. However, after looking closely, he realized that it wasn't. The sharpness of this sword charged right into the clouds. It wasn't like the true god-refined sword, which was thick and simple. The aura was similar, but it wasn't the same. However, at this moment, the sword was at the center of the sword formation, but it was the core of the formation. It pretty much didn't use much energy to control the energy flow of the entire formation. There were no obstructions at all. 7 swords merged into a wall, pretty much perfect. It caused this sword formation that no one was in charge of to be extremely strong. Its strength was no weaker than that of an End Realm Saint Venerable. This is the refined soul sword that your senior brothers spent a lot of effort to find countless heaven-ranked spirit materials to refine. The god-refined sword has no owner, so this is the only way. Wei Su explained, that year, Master said that if the 7 swords merged together, it would cause the 7 swords to be equal to intermediate god treasures. It would allow our Tsang Xingdao to have 7 End Realm experts. One sword formation can fight against at least 6 End Realm experts. It can even injure the undying soul of an End Realm Saint Venerable. With this God-refined sword, it wouldn't be difficult to go up against 2 to 3 End Realm experts. The moment he said this, the 7 celestial swords in front of everyone's eyes all shook and flew apart. Zhongsho could feel that apart from the fake God-refined sword, the artifact spirits of the other 6 swords were unhappy with the fake God-refined sword. However, at this moment, under the control of their masters, they were practicing with the fake God-refined sword such that there were no barriers between them. It forcefully wiped away the unhappy intents of the 6 sword artifacts. At the same time, a buzzing sound spread out from Zhongsho's sleeves. The intent of a nameless sword shone into Zhongsho's soul ocean. First, it was filled with rage and helplessness, then sadness and disdain. In the end, it was filled with self-pity. Zhongsho couldn't help but shake his head. Why did it come again? He remembered that when he returned from the 9 extreme death jail, the sword spirit of the nameless sword had such a change of heart. After that, it was dispirited for a few days before it recovered. Why was it the same this time? His heart moved. He remembered that the last time the sword spirit of the nameless sword had such emotions was when it heard that way, Su had crafted a fake God-refined sword. He remembered that when he obtained the sword that day, he was in the common people's vast habitat. Could it be that the nameless sword was related to the God-refined sword? He reached out with his spiritual sense, sweeping the body of the nameless sword inch by inch. This sword had followed him for many years, and now it had upgraded to a celestial sword. Its grade wasn't low and was comparable to a grade 4 celestial artifact. Be it the ability or the toughness of the sword body, it was the best among celestial swords of the same grade. The sword body was blood red because it had absorbed large amounts of vital energy and soul energy. No matter how Zhongsho looked at it, he was unable to connect it to the God-refined sword. He shook his head. For some reason, Zhongsho felt a little unjust in his chest. He felt that the God-refined sword wasn't worth it. Is this a good idea? How about this? Even if the God-refined sword has a master in the future, it would be tough for it to merge into this formation. It would be rejected by the other 6 swords. In other words, the soul-refined sword that Shizi left behind was equivalent to being useless. We can only do that. Wei Su was silent and speechless. Mingyue said coldly, Song Shengdao is already at the point of life and death. If the God-refined sword really has a spirit, it should find its own master to protect our sect. It shouldn't stay in the ancestral hall and be picky. A sword that no one can use, isn't it the same as trash? Junior Marshal Brother Wei was forced to forge the fake soul-refined sword. Like Song Shengdao, if we can't get past that stage in a few days, then we won't have a future. At that time, the 7 swords won't be able to merge. Zhongsho was stunned when he heard this. He could roughly see that the few of them had really complicated feelings toward the God-refined sword. They loved it, but also had some grievances. They were indeed helpless. At this moment, the nameless sword in his sleeves gave out a cry and shook slightly. The thoughts that were transmitted over were incomparably wronged, and there was a feeling of despair. Zhongsho was speechless, thinking to himself that it wasn't the God-refined sword, so why was it so dejected? However, he was attracted by Mingyu's last few words. Couldn't get past that stage in a few days? In other words, Wei Su's tribulation was set to be a few days later? When will Senior Brother Wei Su go through the tribulation? 4 or 5 days. As for the specific time, I am not sure. Wei Su shook his head. His expression was really calm. I can't delay any longer. When I go through the tribulation will depend on when this sword formation completes the first step. Anyways, the earlier the better. Zhongsho knew what he meant. Including the Confucians, Song Shengdao was second to last out of the 6 factions of the Cloud World. Their opponent might be the Taoist, Demon, and Confucian factions working together. Just thinking about it, one knew that the more they delayed, the worse it would be for Song Shengdao. Every day that passed, the strength of the common people's vast habitat would increase a little. However, The strength of the three factions far exceeded that of Song Xingdao. Their strength would only increase by a lot each day. Chapter 10:13. Zhongshou didn't pay much attention to the matter of the seven swords. Actually, he was happy about the fake god refined sword that Wei Su crafted. With these seven swords, it would more or less increase Song Xingdao's strength. If it could really be like what Wei Su said, to be able to go up against 2 to 3 end realm cultivators, that would be great. Passing the sword formation at the center of the palace, in just a dozen breaths, they arrived in front of the main hall. However, when they arrived, Zhongshou saw that in front of the hall, below the steps, there was another purple-gold sword stuck there. This time, Zhongshou recognized it right away. It was the true god-refined sword. It was nailed into the green stone, giving off a dim glow and giving off a deathly aura. Zhongshou looked curiously towards Wei Su, Mingyu, and Wei Su, only to hear Wei Su say, Senior Master Shoguan moved it here. He wants to try whether or not there is a master within Song Xingdao. It is stuck here. As long as one is a disciple of Song Xingdao, one can try. Unfortunately, he paused, Wei Su's eyes dimmed. During these 2 months, out of the 300,000 disciples in the vast habitat, no one was able to pull it out. Zhongshou could hear the despair in Wei Su's words. Thus, he silently walked in front of the god-refined sword. After hesitating for a few breaths, Zhongshou reached out and grabbed the handle of the god-refined sword. In that instance, Zhongshou felt his heart suddenly jump intensely. He felt like he was connected to this sword by flesh and blood. His heart and soul were connected. That 5-foot sword body felt like an extension of his arm. Energy intertwined, meridians connected. Zhongshou was instantly delighted. He used strength to pull, but then he was startled. His current cultivation was already intermediate celestial realm, but his combat strength was comparable to God realm. This pull was at least equivalent to the strength of 1,000 small Sumera mountains. However, the soul-refined sword seemed to have taken root and remained firmly nailed to the ground, not moving in the slightest. He tried again, but the result was still the same. Zhongshou frowned and withdrew his hand. He laughed self-deprecatingly and stroked the nameless sword in his sleeve. This might be his last attempt, and he had already confirmed that he was not fated with this sword. Actually, it didn't matter. It was enough for him to call himself nameless. The potential of a nameless sword was limitless, and even end-realm experts couldn't see its limit. In fact, one day, it might even surpass this soul refinement sword and become a divine weapon. There is really no need to be depressed over this. However, he felt a little strange. When he came into contact with it earlier, he clearly felt that he and the refined soul sword had become one. It was as if they had been fighting side by side for decades. However, in the end, he was still unable to use it. He felt like he was still lacking something. On his side, he didn't care much. On the other side, Wei Su and Mingyu sighed regretfully. In the distance, hundreds of Song Xingdao disciples noticed the weird situation and looked over. They shook their heads in disgust. Another person. It seems like this soul-refined sword is destined to have no master. Who is this person? Why does he need to personally welcome him? It is Tan Xiao. I heard that he is the most outstanding junior disciple of our Song Xingdao in these decades. He even surpassed Taiyuan Fairy, Shui Lingbo. Is his cultivation already celestial realm? This person's cultivation seems to have just improved. His realm isn't stable, and he can't totally cover his aura. Has this person only entered the sect for a few decades? Just a little over 10 years. Out of the 6 pinnacle swords of the cloud world, only this person was unknown in the outer region, and no news spread back. He actually reached the celestial realm without making a sound. This is really extraordinary. No wonder the revered one personally came out to welcome him. Such a person actually can't be recognized by this soul-refined sword. What does it want? I wonder what kind of conditions Ancestral Master Shi Zi set for the sword spirit? Isn't that a little too harsh? What is the use of an ownerless sword? It is also coincidentally the time when our Tsang Xingdao is facing a calamity. Discussions broke out. The more they spoke, the more they went overboard. Wei Su's expression darkened slightly as he swept his sharp gaze across the area. It caused the surrounding voices to fall silent. The nearby Tsang Shengdao disciples all kept quiet. Although that was the case, there were still many people who were unhappy. However, it wasn't directed at the soul-refined sword, but at Wei Su. Speaking of calamity, it is the revered one who acted rashly and caused this calamity for our Tsang Xingdao. For one person to cause trouble for the entire Tsang Xingdao. At this moment, Mingyu also scoffed coldly. It contained true qi, shocking one's heart. This was why no one dared to make a sound. The nameless sword was still buzzing like it was feeling wronged. Zhongshu didn't bother much and looked towards Wei Su. Although the latter's expression was calm, his broad and imposing figure suddenly became a little hunched, filled with a sense of desolation and desolation. Mocking himself, Wei Su didn't bother about it and continued to walk into the hall. Mingyu let out a long sigh and followed behind. He could use his prestige to suppress and make these people shut up. However, he couldn't stop their mouths. They wouldn't say it on the surface, but they would still discuss it behind his back. At that time, their words would be even more unbearable. Zhongshu clenched his fists tightly. He didn't expect the hearts of the people and the common people's vast habitat to be scattered to such an extent. The Taoist faction used their strength to suppress, and in the end it was effective. The people of the world were like that, only seeing Wei Su's mistakes and bringing disaster to Tsang Xingdao. These people didn't think about how much effort Wei Su had put in the past. Thousands of years of hard work, struggling to survive, causing Tsang Xingdao's strength to recover bit by bit. If it wasn't for him being too anxious this time, he could have been at his peak. If not for Wei Su, Tsang Xingdao probably wouldn't have existed thousands of years ago. However, Zhongshu also sighed leisurely before following. This matter was Wei Su's fault, and he had to take responsibility for it. People's hearts were like that, and it wasn't something that their words could easily make him change his point of view. Moreover, with Wei Su's personality, he probably wouldn't do that. To rebuild his prestige, he could only wait for him to pass the end realm tribulation. After walking into the main hall, Zhongshu's attention was attracted by the person at the top. White brows and white hair, but he looked really young. His aura was special and unforgettable. However, he didn't give off the aura of an end realm saint venerable. Instead, he was like a normal person who looked really peaceful. This was Xiuguan. This wasn't the first time he saw him, but the last time was just a projection of Xiuguan across thousands of worlds, and it was really short. This time, it was the first time he saw him in person. Out of all the end realms in the cloud world, he was the top. At this moment, he looked over with a warm gaze filled with praise and happiness. Zhongshu bowed respectfully to the few seniors and found a place to sit down. Then, he heard Xiuguan say, "You are not bad. Your talents are good, but your heart is even better. For Wei Su to accept you as a disciple, taking you in under junior sister Xian Shuang, I am really happy." At this moment, the hall was filled with God Realm and above, core people of Tsang Xingdao. Naturally, Zhongshu didn't need to hide his identity. Based on the arrangement in the Mysterious Life Golden Book, he sat 10th. He was already eye-catching. At this moment, along with Xiuguan's words, pretty much everyone looked over at him. Zhongshu didn't show any uneasiness and accepted it calmly. He directly asked, "The sect is on the verge of life and death. Should we go all out and fight to the death? Why did Senior Master Xiuguan and Senior Brother Wei Su split their efforts? Why leave a way out? How can the sect work together to fight against the enemy? Is Senior Master Xiuguan not confident?" Everyone wanted to survive, and the entire sect was going to face a battle to the death. However, there were some people. They didn't need to die. How could they be convinced? Everyone in the hall was speechless and exchanged glances with one another. Xiuguan was also stunned. In the end, he laughed out loud. He wasn't annoyed by Zhongshu's scolding at all and admitted his mistake. "I was wrong. At Tsang Xingdao, rather than fall and live like the legalists and demon sects, why not go all out? It isn't a big deal that the legacy is broken. His tone was light, but Wei Su, who was beside him, smiled bitterly. If the legacy was broken, after Wei Su died, how would he have the face to meet Shi Zi's master? However, he didn't say anything and continued. Junior brother Zhongshou is right. In this battle, Aitsong Xingdao can only go all out. Everyone knows that Taoist faction Qing Xian and Taiwan Taoist Lord have both returned. Confucian faction Dong Zhongshu and Zhu Zi are already in White Deer Cave. World-stepping Demon Lord and Wushang Yuan Demon have sent their bodies over. Apart from that, the Taoist faction can also send 2 End Realm God Venerables. The Confucian faction has 3 Saint Incarnations, and the Demon Sect has a world-destroying God Venerable. Just the known End Realm combat strength alone has 12. When Zhongshou heard this, he knew that the people in the hall weren't waiting for him. They had gathered here to discuss before him. 12 End Realm. That was really terrifying. Curling his lips, Zhongshou looked around and looked at the few people sitting above him. Xiuguan, Lin Xianjing, Lin Suan, and also his 6 senior brothers. He recognized Wei Su and Mingyu. The one who sat below Wei Su with a white face and no beard was senior brother Xiangming. The one in a gray robe with a cold face was second senior brother Ji Shu. The one with a muscular body who looked like a martial artist was called Hanji. The last one was small and looked like a 14-year-old child. It was his 5th senior brother, Gu Sun. The 6 of them were all Saint Realm Venerables and had decent strength, close to peak God Realm. The 6 of them basically had the word Ri in their names. As for the other Saint Realm Venerables on the Mysterious Life Golden Book, apart from Senior Master Lanrua, who was of the same generation as Shi Zi, none of them were here. The few of them were really friendly towards Zhongshou. Zhongshou looked over and nodded his head as a greeting. Then, Zhongshou's eyes locked on a Fan Meng and Lin Suan. A teen was looking towards him with a sad expression. Her eyes were filled with joy, like she wanted to jump into his arms right away. However, it was obvious that Lin Suan was using true qi to forcefully control her, such that she couldn't succeed. She looked like she was about to cry. Zhongshou nearly laughed out loud. He really wanted to hug this brat and dote on her. His Chu Shui was just too cute. However, he knew that now wasn't the time and could only bear with it. Chapter 10:14. If it was just 12 End Realms, our common people's vast habitat would be able to block them. When Shi Zi's master died and we were surrounded by the various sects, we were just slightly weaker than today. The one who spoke was Ji Shu, who said seriously, "It seems like Qing Xian's plans aren't just limited to this." The Taoist faction that year had already split out a Kenzo sect. At this moment, there was a demon sect working together. However, Song Xingdao wasn't just relying on Xiuguan alone to support the sect. When Wei Su heard that, he nodded his head. That is not the case. That year, there were many End Realm Saint Venerables who had their souls scattered by Shi Zi's master. Till date, they were unable to revive. The descendants of these people all hate Song Xingdao to the bone. 10,000 years ago, they weren't able to recover and didn't participate. 10,000 years later, it is hard to say whether or not Qing Xian has any connection with them. Apart from that, there is also that person. Everyone's expression darkened slightly. The other End Realms could be underestimated. Only that person could be on the same level as Xiuguan. Even the various restrictions of the common people's vast habitat might not be able to stop him. That person could disregard him. Didn't we have to wait 16 years? Lin Fanming opened her mouth and asked. Her emotions were in shock, and she couldn't care about the disciples behind her. When she woke up, she noticed that Chu Shui had shifted her position behind Zhongshou. She couldn't help but grit her teeth and stare viciously at Zhongshou, causing the latter to sigh in pity. We have to be merciful when we predict the enemy. Qing Xian schemed against me once, and I don't want to lose a second time. Wei Su shook his head. That year, I predicted that the cloud world would need at least 50 years to enter the peak of the spiritual wave. However, it only took a few years. Who knows what changes will happen to that person? If he encounters an opportunity, it wouldn't be strange for his injuries to recover ahead of time. After he finished speaking, the atmosphere in the hall became even colder. However, Zhong Shou did not feel anything. He still did not know who the person that Wei Su was talking about was. He wanted to find someone to ask, but Gu Sun, who was sitting beside him, shook his head and said, "I can't ask, and I can't tell." This person had the 6 ears divine ability. Then, even if he was thousands of worlds away, he would still know. You even know what we said before and after. Zhong Shou was horrified. What kind of existence was this? He had such a terrifying ability. At this moment, everyone's gazes also turned to Shoguan. The latter said indifferently, "This old man's injuries were actually healed 700 years ago. He had been cultivating a secret technique all this while. If he comes, it won't be difficult to win." Only then did the atmosphere in the hall become more relaxed. However, they also knew that although Shoguan said that when it came to the battle, Shoguan wouldn't be able to go all out to fight this person. 10,000 years ago, it was senior brother Shoguan who supported the situation alone. 10,000 years later is still the same. Yuan Jing gave out a sad smile. "Although I'm also End Realm, I can't help you much." Shizi had fallen, and Shoguan's cultivation was the strongest in the world. He wasn't like Zhong Shou, but he was truly invincible in the cloud world. Even in this region, there were only 3 to 5 people who could compare to him. However, in each battle, he was outnumbered and had to deal with them. At this moment, if there were 1 or 2 cultivators of the same grade helping him, the situation would be different. Shoguan's skills would definitely be able to be used. Long Ying has already promised that this battle will come. Ao Kuan and junior brother Zhong Shou have already arrived in the cloud world. The former's sword technique is amazing, although the latter is Saint Realm. He can make all Saint Venerables fear him. At this moment, Zhong Shou suddenly interrupted. "A few days ago, my brother's foundations were completed. He has already agreed to try to help senior ancestor Xianjing repair a portion of her foundations. However, the consumption of true essence isn't small." As he spoke, everyone in the palace was stunned for a moment, then indescribably delighted. Yuan Jing suddenly clenched her fists. A weird glow flashed in her eyes. She was forcefully suppressing it so that she didn't lose her composure. Not only her, but Xiaoguan and Fan Ming also smiled. Wei Su didn't wait for Zhong Shou to finish. "As for the true essence consumption, I, Song Xingdao, won't let brother Ao suffer. There are still 50 heaven essence life creation pills in the treasury that you can take out. The 13 grand development replenishing pills that Master refined all those years ago can also be used by him. The former was to extend lifespan and increase life force, while the latter was to make up for the true essence loss. One could imagine the effects of pills refined by someone half a step to true realm." Zhong Shou smiled, thinking that Wei Su knew his place. However, he didn't dare to guarantee that in these few days, Ao Kun would be able to repair Yuanjing's foundations to an extent. How would an End Realm foundation be so easy to repair? It would definitely take hundreds of years. Wei Su also knew the key points, but he was still really excited. "I will try my best to delay the tribulation by 10 days. He hesitated as he looked opposite. Venerable Lanra understood and nodded his head without a care. "I won't back down. I will use the spiritual dream-inducing technique to help him. To repair the foundations of others, one had to have enough understanding of their Tao path. Just comprehending it would take a lot of time. The spiritual dream-inducing technique was the easiest way." Out of everyone present, only Lanrua's Tao path was similar to Yuanjing's. It could allow Long Ying to understand what Yuan Jing lacked in a short moment and how to help. This technique would consume hundreds of years of lifespan, and after using it, one would be really weak and need 1,000 years to recover. However, it was also the quickest method. An End Realm whose combat strength was close to a complete Saint Realm compared to a peak Saint Realm didn't need to waste any effort. Zhong Shou's lips curled up. Out of Song Xingdao, there There was another person who knew a lot about Yuan Jing. He could use the spiritual dream-inducing technique without worrying about using up too much energy. The source life spirit breathing technique would allow one to recover in the shortest amount of time, even if they lost some energy. To a certain extent, one could use up one's life force. Although that woman would also suffer losses when she acted. It was better than Senior Master Lanruo destroying his own Dao path. To charge for End Realm, the next 2,000 years were the key. He couldn't waste it on healing his old injuries. Wei Su felt really ashamed. A moment later, he opened his mouth once more. After talking about End Realm, let's talk about Dao soldiers. During this battle, the Dao soldiers of the Cloud World factions didn't have time to expand. There are too few Xian and Huang Grey Dao soldiers. My Tsang Xing Dao only has 20,000 cavalry and a Heaven Grey Dao soldier sword formation, which would be wiped out in one strike. If we can't use them in this battle, we can just toss them aside. We have a total of 300 Source Ocean Spirit changing warriors and 1,400 common people's extinction cultivators. The Taoist and Demon factions should have more than Tsang Xing Dao, around 4 times. The Confucian faction doesn't have Dao soldiers, but they can persuade the Taishang Emperor Lord. Zhong Shou couldn't help but interrupt Wei Su. When I was in the outer region, I heard that the Taoist faction bought 1,000 Spirit Realm slaves a few years ago. This is only limited to what I know. Whether or not they bought Celestial Realm slaves, and whether or not they bought them from other places, I am not sure. The room was instantly silent. Everyone's faces were ashen white, like they had been hit by a stick. If Zhong Shou's first piece of news surprised them, then Zhong Shou's first piece of news surprised them. Then this time, it caused everyone's mood to fall to the bottom. Wei Su was also speechless. After a long while, he smiled bitterly. So, Taoist faction Qing Xian had planned this long ago. A few years ago, he had predicted it. Since he had predicted it, then he couldn't blame Dong Zhongshu and Zhu Zi and the 2 Demon Lord for returning at such a coincidental time. After recovering from her daze, Lin Yuanjing looked down, only to see that the few Saint Realms were fine, but the dozens of God Realm disciples had bitter expressions on their faces. She instantly stared viciously at Zhong Shou. She really didn't know what to say about this junior nephew. Such news could have been told privately. In public, it messed up the morale of the army. When Wei Su mentioned that person, it already made everyone feel heavy pressure. At this moment, to know that the Taoist faction had bought 1,000 Spirit Realm slaves a few years ago, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Only Xie Wan had a smile on his face. At least this news came in time. It is better than waiting for the battle to start and catching us off guard. However, is there any proof of this matter? I heard about this from a Shura race person. This person's identity is high and can be trusted. The news should be true. Xie Wan's eyes squinted. He didn't ask Zhong Shou who that person was, directly nodding his head. A few days ago, when I entered the Ancestral Hall, I noticed that the Xianming Golden Book was missing a page. Zhong Shaxin was stunned. As expected, he couldn't hide this matter from others, especially the person in front of him. Then, everyone in the hall was shocked. Numerous spiritual senses looked towards the direction of the Ancestral Hall. Then, everyone's faces turned green. The Ancestral Hall was heavily guarded, and it was extremely difficult for outsiders to enter. Even End Realm cultivators couldn't do it. Needless to say, he had taken away without anyone noticing. However, it wasn't like no one in this region could do it. However, if it was an outsider, why didn't they steal the Xianming Golden Life Book too? This item could double one's lifespan and was a treasure that many people coveted. The Taoist faction, Confucian faction, and Tsang Xing Dao might have had a battle of beliefs. However, the reason why the Demon Path sect joined hands with the Taoist faction was definitely because of this item. This person was definitely a spy and was one of the few people who could enter and exit the Ancestral Hall freely. Who knew why this person took Lin Xuanchuang's Xianming Golden Life page? Yuan Jing, Wei Su, and the other Saint Realms knew about it long ago. The former said seriously, it was Xian Shuang. The page she placed her spiritual sense and was taken away a few months ago. Xie Wan's gaze was on Zhong Shou from start to finish. Zhong Shou was helpless and felt like he could only let his master down. It wasn't that he didn't want to hide it, but that he couldn't hide it anymore. Thinking about it, Zhong Shou said straightforwardly, "I was the one who took Master's golden life page." Seeing everyone's faces turn dark and sunken, Zhong Shou continued to explain, "A few days ago, I needed a peak saint realm to help and couldn't find one. I was thinking about whether or not I could gather Master's soul in the end." Before he finished, Xiaoguan laughed out loud, reviving Xian Shuang, but not dying in the end realm tribulation. One could imagine the outcome. To be continued. Chapter 10:15. When Zhong Shou walked out of the main hall of the Learning Palace, it was already 6 hours later. At this moment, everyone around him had excited looks in their eyes. The news that Lin Xuanxuang didn't die and her soul was gathered and her body was formed once more. It was like a heart-strengthening needle being injected into the hearts of everyone here. Even though Zhong Shou said that Lin Xuanxuang's injuries hadn't healed and her body could still recover to End Realm. Even then, it was more than enough to cover the news that the Taoist faction had bought 1,000 Spirit Realm slaves. With Lin Xuanxuang's End Realm cultivation, even if her body was slightly weaker, she would be able to cast spells under the heavy protection of the common people's vast habitat. There wasn't much of a difference. Focusing on the martial path and not good at spells was only relative to people of the same grade. Especially that source life spirit breathing technique, which could help one gather life force and heal injuries. It was a top healing technique. This made one look forward to it even more. Even Wei Su's body seemed to be filled with more life and hope. Within Tsang Shengdao, they had gained 2 more quasi-end realm experts in a day. Yuan Jing and Lin Xuanxuang might not be able to take them head-on. However, they could protect Xiaoguan such that he didn't have to worry about anything. Only Zhong Shou looked on coldly from the side. There was no joy or sadness in his heart. Knowing that Lin Xuanxuang had revived was like grabbing onto a life-saving grass in a desperate situation. However, he wasn't so optimistic and guessed that the Taoist faction's plans weren't just limited to this. Wei Su was a top strategist and pretty much had no loopholes in his plans. However, such a person still fell into Qing Xian's trap. His foresight and meticulous planning could be imagined. Thinking about it, during the last few days outside of the 9 Extreme Death Jail, Lin Xuanxuang's words and actions were filled with deep meaning. She didn't have high hopes for this battle. Did he leave after his bloodline had evolved and he had awakened the sky-burning blood eyes to find another bargaining chip? Who knows when his master would be able to rush back? Zhong Shou was pessimistic, but he did not show it on his face. There was no need to pour cold water on them when their morale had just been boosted. Otherwise, the elders would come to settle the score with him. That night, Chu Shui was practically glued to his side, unwilling to leave even half a step. When Zhong Shou was meditating, she slept soundly on Zhong Shou's lap. This made Fan Meng and Wanderer Lin Suan so angry that they could only leave helplessly. When Zhong Shou woke up the next day, he found that Chu Shui was still asleep. He couldn't help but find it weird. Could it be that Ruoshui's drowsiness was contagious? When cultivators reached the spirit realm, not sleeping for dozens of days was a small matter. They would often use a few breaths to meditate to recover their energy. However, at this moment, Chu Shui had slept for several hours, which was something that he didn't understand. Caressing Chu Shui's smooth black hair, Samaraim's eyes flashed with love and shock. In terms of cultivation, Chu Shui really gave him a huge surprise this time. Her physical body didn't leak, true essence like jade, indestructible body, spirit-forged jade bones, spirit-locked celestial muscles. This brat had actually reached the peak of celestial realm, half a step to God realm. How could he, the master, accept this? He could sense that within Chu Shui's sleeves, 5 auras no weaker than celestial realm cultivators were locking onto him, warning him. They were storing up strength and waiting to strike, like as long as he had any bad intentions towards Chu Shui, they would pounce out to swallow his flesh and blood. They were the five-god beast subspecies that Zhongsho found for Chu Shui, natural protector beasts. However, at this moment, there were obvious changes. It wasn't appropriate to say that they were subspecies. Looking at their auras, they had stepped into the lowest realm of god beasts and weren't as tender as when they were just born. They were filled with a fierce aura and a bloody scent. They had definitely gone through many massacres. Zhongsho's lips curled up, not bothering as he rubbed Chu Shui's cute cat ears and pinched her nose. Thinking to himself, it seems like these few fellows' wings have grown strong. I will trample on your master. Let's see what you can do to me. A few beast cries entered his ears. It was obvious that they were all shocked by Zhongsho and didn't dare to be rash. Chu Shui wasn't annoyed, waving her arms to slap his hands away. In the end, her body trembled slightly as she woke up in a daze. When she opened her eyes, Chu Shui looked at Zhongsho's teasing gaze. Her expression hadn't recovered yet. She stretched and curled up like a kitten, hugging Zhongsho even tighter. She really wanted to shrink into his embrace. A few breaths later, her face flushed red as she buried her head in Zhongsho's chest, not willing to raise it up. Zhongsho couldn't help but laugh out loud. He hadn't been so happy in a long time. Why are you so sleepy? Like you haven't slept in a few years? No. Chu Shui instantly shook her head, saying in a cute tone, however, Shui really hasn't slept in a few months. Only by young master's side can I sleep peacefully. Zhongsho's eyes instantly squinted dangerously. It was originally a joke, who knew that it was actually true. Is it Fan Meng who is unaffiliated? She doesn't let you sleep? If she really dared to torture his Shui, even if Fan Meng was his master, Lin Xuanchuang's sister, he was going to settle this debt with her. Chu Shui snorted, of course not. Master treats me really well. There was a period of time when she had to do a lot of homework. Her schedule was full, and she couldn't cope. At the start, I also called her an old witch. She also threw Shui into a place called the spiritual hidden world. There was no one there, only all sorts of weird-looking beasts. Pretty much every day we would fight. Zhongsho's lips instantly curled up. This Fan Meng unaffiliated person did have some skill. He had never heard of the spiritual hidden world, but he knew that Chu Shui's fighting instincts and combat martial body could only be developed to the extreme in continuous high-intensity battles. The fierceness of Chu Shui's 5 protector beasts came from this. Chu Shui wasn't the only one who benefited from the intense battles. However, once when Shui was injured, Master took care of me for 7 days and 7 nights. Then, she brought me to chase for half a day and killed the beast emperor that hurt me. Then, Shui didn't think so anymore and stopped scolding her. Zhongsho sighed. He really didn't know what to say about this Chu Shui. She was too easily bought over. It was all his fault for not teaching her well in the past. After recuperating for a few months, Master dripped something called lotus root essence liquid into my body every day. My bones itched and it hurt at that time. However, ever since I recovered from that injury, those beasts in the spiritual hidden world couldn't beat me anymore. Zhongsho's brows furrowed. It should be the spiritual lotus essence liquid. Extracting the juice from the 10,000-year lotus root and refining it with other spiritual herbs. Although it wasn't a celestial pill, it was one of the most expensive and precious body-training spiritual herbs in the world. Especially celestial realm and god realm cultivators, it was something they could only dream of. Was this the reason for the spirit-refined jade bones and spirit-locking celestial muscles? His senior master was really willing to spend so much. A few days later, when Shui had no opponents in the hidden spirit world, Master let me out. She threw me under a waterfall and there was a huge whirlpool there. The water there was different from our cloud world water, at least 1,000 times heavier. Not only did I have to stand firm under the waterfall, but I also had to memorize books and records and consume something called a 9 Chintongshian pill. Zhongsho's lips were twitching. 9 Chintongshian pill? Consume it every day? This pill was really famous in the cloud world and could greatly increase one's cultivation. There weren't many left in the world, and there were very few people who could refine it. However, There were very few people who had enough lifespan to consume it. If one's cultivation rose quickly, naturally one would rile up one's foundations. Only those people who had no hope of improving would crave for the 9 Chun pill, to charge at one's own realm to reach a higher level. At this moment, he finally knew where Chu Shui's shocking cultivation came from. Large amounts of spiritual lotus essence liquid was injected into Chu Shui's body. After the medicinal effect spread out, there were still remnants. Under the waterfall, within the giant whirlpool, the turbulent flow was like a knife, helping Chu Shui to train her body and bring out the remaining medicinal effects. Consuming the 9 Chun pill was a double-edged sword to other people. However, to Chu Shui, it was only beneficial and not harmful. Combat martial body didn't need to spend too much time on the martial path and spiritual cultivation. She could grasp the Grand Tao without knowing anything. Just now, he had checked and found that Chu Shui's foundations were much stronger than his. As for memorizing books, there was a deeper meaning behind it. One couldn't give up on one's comprehension just because of the combat martial body. Forcefully memorizing it, in the future, even if one obtained a little, it would benefit Chu Shui for the rest of her life. This Fan Meng was truly a great teacher. In a short time, she was able to adjust Chu Shui to such a level. He thought back to the 9 Chun pill and the spiritual lotus essence liquid. Zhongshou couldn't help but feel a sense of jealousy and envy. Look at Shui's master. He was really responsible. As for his masters, be it Long Ying or Lin Xuan, they were all unreliable. Only then did I relax. Master said that my cultivation was too shallow and it wasn't a good thing. In the future, I don't need to purposely cultivate and don't rush to advance. I just need to play. A few months ago, I returned to the Cloud World and made a trip to the Instant Space Dragon Hall. Shui wanted to help young Master and wasn't willing to play, so I stayed there for a few months. Master also scolded me a few times. Like she thought about something, Chu Shui said, "Oh, right." Master also gave Shui many things, many celestial stones. There are also dozens of treasures, all celestial treasures that can kill people. She took out a storage ring and smiled as she waved it in front of Zhongshou's face, looking over in delight, like she was saying that Shui had someone to rely on. In the future, if Master bullied her again, she would find Master to settle the score with him. This made Zhongshou feel really bored. It seemed like he had to teach this little girl a lesson. To think that he felt injustice for her and wanted to find Fan Meng to reason with her senior master. Thinking about it in his heart, Zhongshou directly made a move. He reached out to pinch Chu Shui's tender face. Shui giggled as she stood up and dodged backwards. In the blink of an eye, the two of them suddenly stopped. Zhongshou's hand coincidentally pinched Chu Shui's chest. After a few breaths, Chu Shui's face flushed red. She hugged her chest and ran out in a panic. "Young Master, you pervert. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.